Hello and welcome to Fantasy Life Show, Week 7 Instant Recap Edition. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It's a great day to be great. It's a great day to break down all of the nonstop action from yet another eventful NFL Sunday. And joining me, as always, the one, the only, Dwain, The Rock McFarland. Dwain, we were just, kind of moaning about some injuries and maybe the lack of reporting surrounding them, but still plenty of football and still plenty of good stuff to talk about.
Plenty of good stuff. Miss McFarland just cooked up some steaks, so I just ate those before coming on the show. Usually I handle all the grilling, but she wanted to sear them in the pan and see how it worked out. And I have to say, she did a great job, Ian. So, I'm feeling fantastic. I just ate a steak, potatoes, asparagus. I'm ready. I got my iced tea, still kind of partially full here. I'm ready.
She said, hold up, Dwain, let me cook. And you rightfully said, yeah, man, that is absolutely fine by me. I got some cheap sushi waiting for me after this, but plenty to get through before we get to that, just miracle of food preparation later. So let's kick things off, Dwain, with the morning 9:30 a.m. London action. The Jaguars took down the Patriots 32-16, clinching their ticket back to the States after losing in England back in week 6. They covered as 7-point favorites, overdid cash here at 42.5. So Trevor Lawrence went out there, Dwain, just, kind of game managed his way along, got some good production out of Brian Thomas Jr., 89 yards and a touchdown on 5 targets. But let's face it, real star of the morning was none other than Tank Bigsby.
Yeah, man. Tank Bigsby looked really good, but got all the workload. Now, we had seen this building. We'd had this trend where really we had seen Bigsby as the leading rusher in the games where he's been healthy. But with Travis Etienne out of the game, we knew that could even be, something that was even more profound. And that's what happened this weekend. He had 23.8 fantasy points, Ian. He had 66% of the snaps, 67% of the rushing attempts, 38% route participation, and a 5% target share. Passing down still went to Dearness Johnson. Dearness Johnson even sniped some carries down inside the 5-yard line. He was in my brother's starting lineup, and my brother was reaching out to me. What's going on? Dearness Johnson down here stealing carries inside the 5. I'm like, yeah, we're all living the nightmare. But it didn't matter. Bigsby still came through with the 2 rushing touchdowns, and he was telling Doug Peterson, feed me, you moron. Feed me. Feed me. I'm a good player. So it'll be really interesting, Ian, to see what happens when Travis Etienne comes back, because really before the Bigsby injury, we already again saw this trend moving towards Bigsby as the lead ball carrier, and really Etienne in that passing down role. I think there's a better than 0% chance for sure, maybe put it at 25, 30%, that Etienne just takes this Dearness Johnson role and that Bigsby gets to stay in the role he's doing. I don't know that we'll see a 70% rushing attempt share game, but I think we could still see 60, and I think 60% for Bigsby could be really good. Have some tougher matchups coming up, so that isn't necessarily great, but this is really positive for Tank Bigsby.
Next week, Jaguars will be taking on the Packers. And I agree with you, man. If I was running the Jaguars, that would certainly be my move. But really does kind of remind me of the Jaylen Warren situation from last year. Obviously, completely different types of players. But you just saw Warren's name at the top of every single leaderboard with every single rushing stat that we cared about. And that's how it's going with Tank Bigsby. But you know what, Dwain? Doug Peterson, he might not care. So we'll see what happens. Travis Etienne with that hamstring injury, had a shoulder before, certainly not all that healthy. But yeah, we'll be surprised if we do see a healthy Etienne completely pushed aside. We can maybe hope for that Dearness Johnson role, as you mentioned it. Only other thing, again, with the Jaguars, Dwain, would be this big Brian Thomas performance. A lot of people out here chirping that maybe he should have been, one of the top 2 wide receivers off the board. Get out of here, Maserati Marv. So I'm not necessarily one of those people, Dwain. But regardless, 3 top 12 finishes now in each of the, in 3 of the last 4 weeks, I should say. Brian Thomas Jr., man, I said it going into week 6. I said he was knocking on the wide receiver 1 door. I got mocked ferociously for that take because it quickly did not come true. But Dwain, looking like we might be getting there sooner rather than later.
You're usually right somewhere along the way. You just have to wait long enough, guys. And you're usually wrong somewhere along the way. You just have to wait long enough. I'm with you. I'm not completely to this point where, oh my God, Brian Thomas Jr. should have been the second wide receiver in this draft. But I think there is a chance that Brian Thomas Jr. should have been graded a lot closer to neighbors and to where we have Marvin Harrison. So looking at what we got this weekend, Ian, it was a positive 86% route participation. That was a season high. It was only the second time this year where he's run more routes than Gabe Davis. Again, Doug Peterson, get your head out of your you-know-what. If you don't want to get fired, just put your best players on the field and let these dudes ball. We're talking about Brian Thomas Jr. should be at a 95% route participation, Ian. That's what the best receivers in the league get. That's where he should be. So we'll see what happens with it. We'll see if it's a blip on the radar. We'll see if it turns into a trend. But he's one of these players like what we dealt with Drake London last year, where he was only around an 80% route participation. And so we'll see what happens with it. But maybe it's the beginning of a new trend. But yes, obviously Brian Thomas Jr., a very talented player, and should be in the bottom end of that wide receiver 2 with upside conversation moving forward because he's just a baller.
Bit of a quiet, relatively more quiet day for Evan Ingram, just 5 catches for 35 scoreless yards, and a big-time dud for one Christian Kirk, just 24 scoreless yards on 1 catch. Did have a potential touchdown in his hands, but you might have heard this from Trevor Lawrence's pass catchers before, only managed to get 1 foot down on a potential 3-yard touchdown. So, hey, Jaguars got the win. Apparently not getting Doug Peterson, fired in London, as funny as that storyline would have been. We'll see if they can ride this momentum and keep things going in the right direction. Now, with the Patriots, Dwain, Drake May coming out again, multiple touchdowns and 276 passing yards, which I thought you hilariously tweeted. It's like turning water into wine, given some of the pass catchers with this Patriots offense. So really, man, back-to-back weeks of Drake May looking like someone who certainly has the upside as the number 3 overall pick to at least warrant that. Yes, we had a couple dropped interceptions out there. He's not been playing perfect, but at a minimum, Dwain, I can start to wrap my mind around getting excited about some of the other fantasy options in this offense with, again, some of the upside, at least that May is showing.
Yeah, and with May himself, the one challenge we have is next week we get the Jets, and then I think the week after that we get the Titans. So 2 of the tougher passing defenses in the league. Now, Josh Allen had his way today with the Titans, but he's Josh Allen, so we'll see. But to your point, like, it's encouraging that Drake May can come out here, and you've got, Kayshon Boutte is playing a starting role right now. You got Jalen Polk dropping everything thrown within, everything thrown to him, period. You got KJ Osborne. I don't even know that Robert Kraft knew he was on the team. The way he looked over whenever KJ Osborne scored was kind of like, who's that guy? Is he on our team? Did I pay him? Did I give him a free agent contract? Yes, you did, Mr. Kraft. You gave that guy a free agent contract. So the fact that he's doing that, and Hunter Henry, right, was obviously the other guy that was helping lead the way. It is, to your point, it at least gives us some confidence. If I were to say, hey, any of these guys could become relevant for the rest of the way in fantasy, it's probably Hunter Henry in that low-end tight end 1 conversation. And the Demario Douglas, I still think, is the other player. He obviously had something going on. It sounds like he got sick, so basically he did not play in the second half of the game. But even the first half of the game, man, I don't get it, Ian. I don't know what they're doing. They talked about last week playing him more in 2 wide receiver sets, but basically they only use him whenever they go 3 wide receivers. Well, maybe you should just go 3 wide receivers more. I mean, what are we doing? We got to get Austin Hooper on the field? I don't understand it. But those would still be the primary 2 guys. Kayshon Boutte would be the one to kind of keep an eye on. Ian. He came down with a big catch late. He came down with a nice catch last week. Still not a lot of targets coming his way. But again, we need someone in this offense that might be able to make some big plays, and maybe Boutte will end up being that guy. He was a very, very highly lauded recruit. Obviously fell due to some off-field stuff at LSU. Then he fell in the draft process because he was also slow. So not like the ideal combination, but he was a big prospect at LSU, and the Patriots really need someone. So I would say that's only in super deep leagues, but Boutte would be the name I would keep an eye on.
LSU wide receivers, Iowa and South Dakota State tight ends. Sometimes you just got to trust the process.
Just go with it.
You mentioned the big Hunter Henry game, 8 catches, 92 yards on a team high 9 targets. Someone who, again, I don't think needs to be jammed into starting lineups of all shapes and sizes, particularly with these next 3 matchups. You mentioned it, Dwain, Jets, Titans, even the Bears after that. Hardly, an easy afternoon.
That's rough.
That is rough, not good. So Henry, again, Demario Douglas, if he does get over this illness, not exactly guys we're loving, but maybe for the second half of the year, as we get into the double-digit weeks, if you will, we can get more excited. Also, shout out to Michael Hasty. We underestimated the revenge game factor here. Dwain had 49 yards and
he had a nice play.
It was nice. He was the next most productive receiver after Henry. Mentioned the drops with Polk. One of them did come on, a borderline hospital ball, so hopefully he does recover from that head injury. So only other note I would have here, Dwain, is Ramondre Stevenson, another dud at the office. Now, we've been quick to shout, try to sell high if you can after his big games. At a minimum, though, did we see him get his full-time rollback after missing week 6?
No, 50% snaps, 47% of the team's rushing attempts, and 43% route participation. And then you've got Antonio Gibson coming in and getting snaps, and then JaMycal Hasty getting the passing down work. This is actually the worst game script that can happen to Ramondre Stevenson. Yeah. They fell behind against the Jaguars. He's no longer getting that passing down role. This is another one of those weird deals. You just paid Ramondre. He's probably actually your best passing down back. He is probably your best passing down back. Why not just let him play? I get it. You want to take the long down and distance stuff off of his plate. Say, hey, you don't need to worry about picking up blitzing linebackers, taking those hits on your body, but let him play in the 2-minute offense, man. I'm just telling you, defensive coordinators are more worried about Ramondre Stevenson than these other two dudes. But I'm not the coach, Ian. I don't get to make the personnel decisions. And the Patriots have shown us now over a multiple game sample that he is in a committee. And so this kind of game script is a real danger zone. And this was against the Jags, who were 1-5. So if they can fall into this kind of game script against the Jags, when will the Patriots ever be safe from this kind of potential game script?
You lost me at Danger Zone. That's just such a catchy song. Gotta get Top Gun back on.
Mine just went there. Went Kenny Loggins.
Through the Danger Zone. All right, moving right along. The Bengals took down the Browns in the Battle of Ohio, 21-14, covering as 5.5-point favorites. The under did cash here at 42.5. So we'll get to the Browns. Much publicized injury here in a couple minutes. But first, winners write the history books. So got to give some love to the Bengals. Both of their alpha wide receivers, Dwain, really nice afternoons at the office. After a slow start, had the Charlie Jones kick return for a touchdown to open up the game. No scoring until the third quarter, but once they got going, they certainly did get going. T. Higgins, 82 yards and a touchdown. Nice slant where he broke a tackle to get into the end zone. And then Jamar Chase, 55 yards and a touchdown, still showing some of that patented yak ability. League high now, plus 157 yards after the catch, over expected this year per next gen stats. So, Dwain, I think we've always known that Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, two certified ballers. Higgins would be the wide receiver one on plenty of other NFL teams out there, but I saw you tweeting, man. Small sample, still working with only 7 games this year. But you look at the routes when we do have both Higgins and Chase on the field, might not be the number one wide receiver that most people would expect.
Yeah, and not even a full 7 games together, right? So our sample is really smaller than that. But looking at Jamar Chase and T. Higgins this year, when they are on the field together, 32% target share for T. Higgins with a 40% air yard share, 24% target share for Mr. Jamar Chase, and a 32% air yard share. Now, maybe some of this goes back to the work that they got in the preseason whenever Jamar was doing the hold-in. I don't know. I'm not going to worry about it too much. I just thought it was pretty interesting. If you look at these same splits and you go back over multiple years, Jamar Chase is still the leader between the two, but it is closer than what a lot of people might think. And it's honestly a little bit tough to do this kind of analysis, Ian, because there's also been so many games where T. Higgins is trying to play through an injury. Like we've got multiple games like that get mixed in there. So to really do it right, and I didn't have time tonight, you got to kind of go back and look at some of those games where he was only out there playing like 50, 60% route participation, just trying to tough it out sometimes as a decoy. I have a feeling when you pull those out, they might even be a little bit more close. But the main takeaway here is not that we're downgrading Jamar Chase,
no,
but this really might just be the focal point of just these two guys, which we thought it would be anyway. We just need the big games from Joe Burrow. And Joe Burrow just hasn't been quite as good the last 2 games, but really overall for the season, Joe Burrow's been good. Joe Burrow's been good for his career. We still know that these guys are going to be top wide receivers. I think the other big takeaway and the question really, then I'll pose it to you is, are you moving T. Higgins up with this? Or do you just look at this as, okay, great, but we still know that Jamar is the one here?
I think, look, yeah, you're right. Chase isn't changing at all. Top 5 weekly wide receiver. Yeah. We all get that. I think Higgins just comes up from someone who was regularly being drafted almost outside the top 24 wide receivers this year into more of a recommended start in that, muddled kind of upside wide receiver 2 range. If we have Garrett Wilson versus T. Higgins during any given week, I might take T. Higgins at some point, Swain.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. And we'll see what happens, obviously, with Garrett Wilson and this Davante Adams stuff. Like in a vacuum, I think I like Garrett Wilson better, but I like now with Davante Adams with the Jets and with the upside of the Bengals passing game, which I think is higher than the upside of the Jets passing, because I like Joe Burrow more than Aaron Rodgers at this point in his career. I think I'm with you.
I mean, Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, once he's back, if we ever, I guess Shaheed's out of the picture now. So again, just one of those things where Higgins is certainly in that conversation. And if not, maybe leading it at this point. Other big talk again with these Bengals, though, Dwain, would be the backfield, which has slowly but surely started turning into the Chase Brown show.
Yeah, and that just continued this weekend. So if you guys have been listening to this show, you've been hearing about this for 3 or 4 weeks now. He came up small. Yeah, came up small in the box score today with only 7.3 fantasy points. But he was again the number 1 option for the Bengals. Had 59% of the snaps. Ian, that's the big part. 68% of the rushing attempts. So 4 games in a row, he has led this team in rushing. That is a season high, though. He had been in that 50 to 55% rush attempt range, so 68% in this game. 36% route participation. So that is where Zach Moss is still getting involved. Moss had a 39% route participation, was slightly targeted more than Chase Brown. So I think at this point, we just call it, this is what it is. Like, the Bengals have now decided, until they further show us something different, that Chase Brown is their lead back. We're going to see Zach Moss come out there on the field whenever we're in the obvious passing down situation. So that means a downgrade for Zach Moss. He's now a mid-range to low-end running back 3. This means Chase Brown is squarely locked into the bottom-end range of that running back 2. And Ian, the thing is, when he comes through with the big plays and he scores the touchdowns, he's going to be more of a borderline running back 1. So I think you could honestly make the argument that Chase Brown might belong a little closer to like that mid-range running back 2. So I'll think about that one some more for the utilization report. But overall, if you have Chase Brown on your roster, you should feel good about it. I know today wasn't a great game in the box score, but you need to stick with him. And if you don't have him on your roster, now's a good time to go kind of kick the tires on that with the other manager in your league. They see that 7.3 recency bias is a hell of a drug, as Ian likes to say, guys. So just go give it a try. Maybe they say no, but what do you know? You don't know if you don't try to go see if you can get him. So just give it a shot.
Coming into this one, Brown was one of only 6 running backs with at least 50 PPR points over the previous 3 weeks. So I get it, a little bit of a step back from that. But hey, as Dwayne's just stated, utilization is actually moving in an even better direction. Keep on trusting the man. Also, we'll say he had a pretty freaking cool 30, 35-yard run nullified on a hold. So it would have been a lot cooler if that didn't go down. Let's now talk about the Browns, as Lily
loves Chase Brown. She always has.
Well, it's the Browns, man. Dog pound, stand up. Certainly, big piece of that. But yes, Dwayne, we did lose Deshaun Watson seemingly for the season. Torn Achilles is the guess. They haven't completely confirmed it, but everyone pretty much seems to be pointing towards this. So as much as I would love to sit here and say, okay, it's Jameis Winston time, let's do it. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, 3.9 yards per attempt last year, Dwayne. That's how much he averaged. That is dead last. That if you had to actually find the small amount of quarterbacks that are just statistically worse than Deshaun Watson, you will actually find Dorian Thompson's name on that small list. He was the guy that got to go in after Watson got injured. However, he suffered a finger injury and could not finish the game, which then set the table for Jameis to come in there at the end as the emergency third quarterback. So Rap Sheet's already saying that the DTR finger injury is not believed to be serious, but he also added in that tweet, Dwayne, that he is also the presumptive starter moving forward. What are we doing here? How did the Browns mess this up? All of America would love them with Jameis, but we have DTR. Really?
I don't understand it. The only thing I can think is that the Browns are already in tank mode. I mean, is that it? Like, I don't know. Like, we'll see how long the DTR thing lasts, even if he is the starter. Obviously, we want Jameis Winston as fantasy managers because it's huge for David Njoku. It's big potentially for Cedric Tillman. It could even be big for Jerry Jeudy. Like, all these guys could become viable boom bust options if we get Jameis Winston under center. If it's DTR, honestly, it's pretty much like what it was with Deshaun Watson. You're not going to be very interested in putting any of these guys in your lineup. I think Njoku is going to be the exception, because he can soak up some of those targets that are closer to the line of scrimmage. Don't have to travel as far. Even someone with accuracy problems maybe can get him the ball just enough. So that would keep him in the low end tight end 1 range. But man, if we have Winston, Njoku unlocks high end tight end 1 upside. I mean, I don't want to say who could have run better than Njoku. I'm going to say that, but guys, please understand, I'm not saying I want Deshaun Watson to be injured, but think about it. Amari Cooper leaves the team, and then Deshaun Watson, who's been terrible this year, gets hurt and he's out for the season. And you're David Njoku, and now you're suddenly sitting there without the target competition of Amari Cooper, and you have Jameis Winston as your quarterback, a massive upgrade from what you had with Watson, at least as a pure passer. We know Jameis Winston's going to make his errors. Yeah. We know Jameis Winston's going to do that, but we also know that he can go YOLO and he will throw the ball and he can support, 300-yard passing games. Like, this guy can do that. Deshaun Watson couldn't. DTR can't, at least not on a consistent basis. So I don't know if you could run more pure than that, just from a luck standpoint, as far as fantasy goes. But if it's DTR, man, it's gonna be a struggle. I would also say Cedric Tillman, man. If we do get Jameis Winston, Cedric Tillman came out here and scored 18.1 fantasy points today, and that was really across all 3 quarterbacks. He had a 25% target share, man. He had 12 targets in his first game, taking over the starting role for Amari Cooper. 39% of the air yards. That led the team. So he moves into that boom bust wide receiver 4 territory if we get Jameis, and he could quickly, Ian, be a guy that we're like, okay, he's a wide receiver 3 now. It might take one more game, and we suddenly have him in the wide receiver 3 conversation. But with DTR, man, I'm thinking more boom bust wide receiver 5 for Cedric Tillman. And it just kind of, it makes it tough to think about what you want to do with a guy like Tillman this weekend because he's available in most leagues, but it will come back to who the starting quarterback is.
And some of us here, Dwayne, might have started him today in our 32-team football league, but I'm not going to make this about me. Not going to,
Good
hurt
job.
myself, patting my back. But yeah, man, I do think again what you said about the guys, boom or bust. We have not gotten any booms throughout this entire season. Okay, so we're not sitting here saying Jameis is all of a sudden going to turn the Browns into this contender, this high flying aerial offense. But he throws downfield until someone tells him to stop. So please, Kevin Stefanski, just
Tillman is a perfect match for him, man.
Yeah.
Tillman is a perfect match for Jameis. Like that's chocolate and peanut butter. That's a Reese's right there. Like those two guys deserve to be playing together. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but like,
you're good.
I was just thinking of the Tillman Jameis connection. Like that would be amazing.
I do just worry again about Stefanski. Doesn't exactly seem like the type of coach, Dwayne, to necessarily turn things over to Jameis. There is a reason why 32 teams have had 3 or 4 years to get Jameis off the scrap heap. And, he's still sitting here without a starting job. So we'll see what happens. It will be a hell of a lot more fun if we get him under center. But even without, man, Cedric Tillman, David Njoku certainly seeing the targets condensed around them. So otherwise, man, the just big, question here will come into the backfield. Great return from Nick Chubb, managed to score a 1-yard touchdown after the refs took it away from him on a ticky-tack offensive line offsides penalty. Are you kidding me? Found his way to get back in there. So didn't look good. Let's face it. No one has looked all that good in this offense this year. Just 11 carries for 22 yards. But Dwayne also didn't exactly see him, gifted this featured role in his first game back from injury.
Yeah, I mean, he had 35% of the snaps, 55% of the rushing attempts, which ended up being 11 carries. So I think they're just kind of ramping him back up. I'll say 55% of the attempts is pretty good, for your first game back. I wouldn't have been surprised if it was 6 or 7. We also didn't have Jerome Ford, though, in this game, so maybe that was just a little bit of a factor. We talked about this last week on the show, and my thought process was they probably already had a predetermined number that they didn't want to let Nick Chubb go past as far as his rushing attempts in this game. And that was probably like 10 to 12, and that's really where they ended up capping him. I think that will slowly expand as we go. And maybe as this Browns offensive line gets healthy, that will also help. But I'll tell you, having DTR under center also hurts Nick Chubb. Because then if I'm the opposing defense, what's the one thing I'm trying to do? Stop Nick Chubb and stop the run game. I'm inviting DTR to throw the football if I'm opposing coordinators. At least with Jameis, you might still be inviting him to throw the ball, but he can come up with some plays and make a defensive coordinator on the other side change their mind because he can hit some of those big throws down the field. So Nick Chubb, super excited to see him come back. However, rest of season, even once he's in a full-time role, which we don't even know what that looks like. What is a full-time role for Nick Chubb this year? I don't know what it is. Is it 55% of the carries? Is it 65% of the carries? Whatever that number is, once he gets there, I still have a problem getting hyper excited about what Nick Chubb is going to give us in fantasy land just because the Browns are so terrible.
Yeah. Not looking great for Cleveland. Maybe it could at least get a little more fun here as the season goes on. Bar certainly not very high. Let's move on. Dwayne, the Seahawks took down the Falcons 34-17. Seattle obviously covering as 3-point dogs. The under did cash at 51.5. So Geno Smith looked like he was going to go bonkers, man. But honestly, still a good game. 207 yards and 2 touchdowns. 35-yard dime to Metcalf, on the post before halftime. Just a ridiculous throw. One of many he's made for the better part over these last, 2.5 seasons now, but just really a situation where they're up 17-7 at halftime and never really got the issue, pressed by Kirk Cousins and the Falcons. So didn't exactly get that pass happy game script we've seen throughout most of the year. Still good enough though for Metcalf to get his 99 yards and a touchdown on 7 targets. Noah Fant also another big game of 65 scoreless yards. So again, those were the 2 big guys in the passing game. We kind of know what the Tyler Lockett and JSN experiences are at this point, aka wish we had more from JSN. They complete a 35-yard pass to DK Metcalf. That was kind of cool. Dwayne, nice diving catch by DK on that play. But I guess the question here becomes, because again, we know what we're getting out of Geno and these guys more weeks than not. But if we aren't getting DK Metcalf out there because of that knee injury he suffered, how high are you shooting guys like Lockett and JSN up the ranks?
I mean, they're going to move up the ranks. It's just a challenge because JSN's been getting enough targets. He's not doing anything with them. So the question is, does DK Metcalf being out of the lineup actually help that? Does that help JSN? I guess it could mean he could get a 30% target share instead of being around a 21. My gut says the guy that would benefit the most from this would probably be Tyler Lockett, and JSN kind of stays in his same role, picks up a few targets, but I feel like Lockett's the guy that still gets more of the looks down the field, Ian. And if he does happen to have anything left in his bag, which he's clearly deteriorated from where he was 3 years ago, and he's an older wide receiver.
Yeah.
Like, I think he would be the one. But JSN, he could definitely pick up some more targets. I was just looking up real quick, like what happened today after DK Metcalf left the game. So without Metcalf on the field today, 33, and it wasn't as guys, we're talking about 9 snaps for Jackson Smith and Jigba. He had a 33% target share, and then it was 5 snaps for Tyler Lockett. He also had a 33% target share, and then it was Jake Bobo. Jake Bobo picked up 13 snaps with DK Metcalf out and also had a 33% target share. Guess what that is, guys? 1 target each. So not a very big sample size we have here. I can't say I'm really confident in those 33% numbers. My guess is JSM picks up more targets. Lockett's probably the guy that unlocks a little bit more, and maybe Jake Bobo is like a punt DFS play.
Jake Bobo can play, Dwayne. You be careful.
He can play, dude. Yeah. I like watching that dude, and I like watching him on special teams. He's 6'4", and I've seen him get low enough to meet head on with running backs that are like 5'9". That dude is a baller.
Mike McDonald did say on Metcalf's knee injury, quote, "We are optimistic at this point. It doesn't look too bad." So good news there. But I'm kind of with you, Dwayne. Even if Metcalf is out, yes, we'll move him up the ranks. But how many targets does JSN need, man? Coming into this game, Jackson Smith and Najigba had more targets than Stephon Diggs this season.
Yeah, that's apparently he needs a lot. He needs a lot. I mean, it's a good thing he's getting the targets. So the other challenge is, like, it's not even that JSN's playing better to get the targets. It's just that the Seahawks throw the ball every damn play. Like, their drop back rate over expectation is number 1 in the league. Their plays per minute over expectation is number 1 in the league. What does that mean? That means you get the most passing attempts per game over in the league. So JSN's target share is like slightly better than his rookie season, but the really big influx of targets have come from this offense. Now, we don't really care. We're in an offense that throws the ball all the time. So if we do get a little bit more from JSN, Ian, maybe he moves into that Wan'Dale Robinson range of the ranks. I mean, which is really where we've had him anyway. Probably slightly put him ahead of those types, right? Put him slightly ahead of some guys like Wan'Dale, who we know are more slot merchants, dependent on the catches to score their fantasy points.
We'll say this one honestly could have gotten out of hand even more quickly in the Seahawks' first drive of the game. We had a drop 20-yard touchdown by DK Metcalf and a 12-yard touchdown by Kenneth Walker called back on a hold where he had a sick juke to get to the edge in the first place before finding pay dirt. Again, sadly did not count. But guess what, Dwayne? Kenneth Walker, pretty good at the whole football thing because he did score 2 other touchdowns that counted, had a nice 20-yard run, and even an over-the-shoulder catch in the end zone. We were both old enough to remember the times where people wondered if he was able to, in fact, catch the football coming out of Michigan State. So, again, Kenneth Walker, I've talked about him being the rest of season RB1 on this very show before. A take that, Dwayne, I don't think we need to exactly back off on at this point.
Yeah, and I don't think there's really anything else to say here. The one thing I will mention is today we actually saw a reduced workload for Kenneth Walker. He was coming into the game questionable with an illness. A lot of people speculated that it was due to his birthday, which was today, and that they were in the city of Atlanta, and there are certain establishments that maybe Kenneth Walker was frequenting, and maybe
guys being dudes,
have a little bit to drink. So hopefully that's all it was, because it was a 46% snap share versus 55% for Zach Charbonnet. And he still led the team in rushing attempts, 54% versus 31%. But it was Charbonnet back in more of the passing down role at 42% drop back participation rate versus only 30% for Walker. I'm going to chalk it up to the way this game worked out and the fact that Walker was a little bit sick coming in, because really this is the first data point that we've seen like this since week 1. So I'm going to still lean into the fact that Kenneth Walker has the role that he has had, but we'll at least need to monitor this. And he looked fantastic. That touchdown catch was amazing. 23.3 fantasy points in a PPR today.
I will say too, Dwayne, my first instinct was, well, this was kind of a blowout. So was he just game scripted off the field? Not really, guys. I'm looking at the last 2 drives of the game, and on the second to last drive, it was all Kenneth Walker. He actually racked up 4 additional touches on that drive. Final drive of the game, it was only 3 plays where Charbonnet, yes, got some, mop up duty touches, but again, something to keep an eye on. Still feeling good about the chances of Walker racking up 15 to 20 touches more weeks than not, regardless. Over on the other sideline, Dwayne, Falcons, again, bit of a disappointing performance against the Seahawks Seahawks defense that we have seen be had by some of the league's better offenses. So Kirk Cousins, just 232 passing yards, 1 touchdown, pair of interceptions, also lost a fumble. I will give him credit. One of those interceptions did go straight through Drake London's hands, but maybe just a situation where the Falcons, not exactly this offense that we can be expecting to put up top 5 numbers on a weekly basis. That said, Bijan Robinson's starting to look very much like a running back who we can expect to do just that. 103 rushing yards and a score, also had 40 receiving yards. I would say, Dwain, I thought this was the best game I've ever seen Bijan Robinson play. I mean, they really weren't even opening up holes for him. Seemingly, dude was just making guys miss left and right. PFF went on to credit him with 8 missed tackles forced on the ground. So hats off to Bijan. Another really, really great game. Not the stiffest matchup in the world, I get it, but really did seem to make the most out of his touches. I guess the only real question here, Dwain, because I know I'm not exactly breaking news with Bijan Robinson being a good football player. We're starting to trust Kyle Pitts again because he had 7 catches, 65 scoreless yards, team high 9 targets, Dwain. At a minimum, it's looking like what we thought in terms of Drake London and Darnell Mooney being 1A and 1B with Pitts as a distant 2. Maybe, just maybe, we're getting this into more of a 1A, 1B, 1C situation.
Yeah, I think that's possible. Look, we've liked Kyle Pitts for a long time. But up until these last 2 weeks, he really hadn't done much this year. So it was tough to keep defending him. So it is nice to see him take a step forward, do something. He had a 27 or 25% target share today. Like you mentioned, he led the team. Darnell Mooney, 22%. Drake London was at 22%. So we'll keep an eye on it. I still think low end tight end 1 in. I think I need another performance like this to really take it to say, okay, we're going to get Kyle Pitts back into that mid-range tight end 1 conversation. But I think it's certainly, a potential outcome for him. He scored 13.5 PPR points today. So you weren't too disappointed compared to what some of the other tight ends did.
And they were easy. Like his long catch was only 13. I told you guys last week he had the 50-yard catch, but it's like, how many times are we going to get that blown coverage, no one guards you situation? They were actually almost using him more as a check down option, a role that most tight ends actually do have in their offenses for large portions of the game. Just hasn't quite been there for Pitts. So certainly encouraging. We'll see if he can keep on stringing some more such performances together. Next week, we do have, the Falcons taking on the Buccaneers and Seahawks against the Bills, 2 matchups where hopefully, again, we get in some fantasy-friendly shootouts. Next matchup, speaking of those Bills, they took down the Titans 34-10. Buffalo covering as 9.5-point favorites, despite being down 10-7 at halftime. Over did cashier at 41 points. So again, was very much a slow start for Josh Allen and company. But you look at the box score at the end, 323 yards and a pair of touchdowns for Josh Allen. Almost had a third man. Keon Coleman, fantastic day, 125 yards and on 4 catches, but nearly had a 20-yard score added to his total. One of those where the toe was just out of bounds, a la DK Metcalf on Thursday night just last week. So great game from Keon Coleman, Dwain. But the real story, of course, was the debut of Amari Cooper. Had us, in the first half, dropped his first target. Probably had some people like, oh no, what are we getting here? Certainly caught the rest of his, though. 66 yards and a touchdown. Looking very much like the wide receiver 1 he's been throughout his career.
Yeah, only a 34% route participation today, but we talked about that on Friday and on Thursday when we had Friedman on. What kind of role do we think Cooper's going to have? We all pretty much agree that it's probably some limited role. They're going to have a subset of plays where they're going to be comfortable having him out there. Probably certain route concepts that he and Josh Allen would really work on, and so it limited his work. But he really came through in those chances. 42% targets per route run, led the team. And even though he was only out there 34% of the passing plays, he had 16.6 fantasy points. He led the team. Even though Keon Coleman had his best game of the year, it was actually Amari Cooper leading the team in fantasy points for the wide receivers. So, yeah, can't wait to see Amari Cooper in a full-time role, really clicking with Josh Allen. If you happen to have Keon Coleman on your team and you can sell high on this performance, I think I would, Ian. The body of work, I don't want to say Keon Coleman's done for his career, but the body of work we've seen so far this year, not a high-end target earner. The other thing, this is a coaching staff that loves to rotate all these guys. We never know which week Keon Coleman's even going to be on the field versus which week he's going to get buried. And as Amari's reps go up, they're going to have to decide how to split up Keon Coleman's work between these other guys. And there's no guarantee that it's really him continuing to hang on to that role. So young players, typically we're saying go buy. I think in this particular scenario, if you can sell high, I would. I'm not saying you got to go give away Keon Coleman. It is Josh Allen. It is the Bills offense. We could see something where we like both of these players going down the stretch. But I struggle to trust the player, the way the coach uses players. And then when Amari really gets grooving, I wonder how much room is really left for a guy like Keon Coleman.
I kind of have a hard time believing that he'd be someone you could even overly sell high on, Dwain. But you know what? We go to fantasycalc.com sometimes and we are proven wrong with that sort of thinking. So I certainly don't disagree if there is a buyer out there. Dwain, did we see Khalil Shakur get back into a full-time role? Because judging from the, again, 7 catches for 65 yards, looks like he was back to his usual business after last week playing a bit banged up.
Yeah, this was his second best route participation of the season at 80%. And that's the challenge. His route participation is all over the board, even when he's healthy. We have games where we're like, okay, they're unleashing Khalil Shakur, and then the next game is like, oh, 53%. So it's a bit of a struggle on when he's going to get out there. 22% target share. He was tied with Keon Coleman for second on the team behind, or sorry, those two guys were tied for first in target share. Amari Cooper led in targets per route run. So Khalil Shakur, I do think, is the other guy that I still trust the most in this offense behind Amari Cooper. I just look at the way they use him, where they line him up. I don't think it's going to be in conflict with the way that they use Amari.
Probably not a coincidence we got that elevated route rate with Curtis Samuel missing the most of this game with a shoulder injury. Also had Dawson Knox hurting his knee late, Dwain. So when we look at Dalton Kincaid, 3 catches for 52 yards. Also, I believe had an end zone target he just couldn't quite come down with. I would be excited, but then again, as we've kind of talked about over the past few weeks, it's not like Kincaid, hasn't been producing because he hasn't been on the field in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, and I tried to defend Kincaid a little bit last week, and I don't think Amari arriving kills him. I didn't move him down in the rest of the season ranks. I kept him where he was because I feel that there's enough targets for Amari to scoop up from other people and Dalton Kincaid still do his thing. The problem is, what is Dalton Kincaid doing his thing? What does that mean? I don't know what that means anymore. But over the last 3 weeks, let me add this weekend. So the 3 weeks before this weekend, target shares of 26%, 23%, and 30%. So he had a nice trend going. Had done nothing really with those. I mean, I don't say nothing, but not what you would expect. 9.7, 5.4, 11.1 fantasy points. And then today you had Dalton Kincaid come out and get a 19% target share, gave you 8.2 fantasy points. So I think the positive is he's been getting some targets. He could still be the number 2 receiver on this team behind Amari Cooper. I think that's in the range of outcomes for him. The question is, man, can this guy make a play? Can this guy actually do enough to actually score some touchdowns? And can we get some regression here? And I think the answer is yes, we probably eventually will be that. I would just say be careful, though, because I just think at this point, it's hard for us. You would really have to squint hard to say that Dalton Kincaid still has a chance, at least this season, to become a superstar. I don't think so. I think you're basically hoping, could he be a mid-range tight end one? Could he at least just be that? I think there's a chance of that. Still.
Otherwise, last thing to talk about with the Bills would be the return of James Cook. Did find his way into the end zone. No targets on the day, so, just 32 rushing yards in that aforementioned short score, but didn't exactly see Ray Davis carve out this big featured role next to him, Dwain, albeit he did have a nice little touchdown run himself towards the end of the game.
Yeah, sorry. Who'd you just mention, Ian?
James Cook and Ray Davis.
My bad. I was looking at the next team. I forgot we had running backs still to go. I was trying to get ahead for the audience. Yeah, so James Cook did return from the toe injury, and he regained his normal role. He scored 9.2 fantasy points, so you weren't too excited about that, but 54% of the snaps, 60% of the rushing attempts, 46% route participation. If you go look at all of his games before he got hurt, that's essentially exactly where he was. So if you were worried about Ray Davis taking away part of his workload, that did not come to fruition. And this was a game script where you could have saw that happen. It was late in the game. I mean, the Bills were up by a ton, Ian. We could have seen more Ray Davis, but Ray Davis was limited to 25% of the attempts and 20% route participation. He ended up scoring a touchdown to give you some fantasy points. Ray Davis should not be near your fantasy lineups. He looks like he is only a handcuff at this point to James Cook.
A great handcuff, though, as we did find
a
out
great
last
handcuff.
week. So if you do have room on the bench, certainly try to keep a seat warm for Mr. Davis. Over at the Titans, we got the Mason Rudolph experience, which is expected to persist for the next 4 or 5 weeks, which makes the reality that the Titans actually trotted Will Levis out there last week pretty freaking ridiculous to think about. So honestly, did not get the best version of Rudolph, who, if you people remember, actually did put forward the best 4 or 5 game stretch of his career at the end of 2023 with the Steelers. But yeah, Dwain, just 215 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, lost 1 fumble, but put the ball on the ground 2 other times while, back to pass. So Nick Westbrook-Akini caught the touchdown. He now leads the Titans with 2 receiving touchdowns. Very, very depressing thing to say out loud here in my office in lovely Columbus, Ohio. But yeah, Dwain, this passing game I didn't have the highest expectations, but I figured with Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins, we could at least get some spike games. I think we've gotten one from Ridley against the Jets when anyone with a brain didn't start him because it was against the Jets. Yeah, man. Like, look, next week against the Lions, saw him today against the Vikings, didn't fall apart maybe as much as we thought they might without Aiden Hutchinson. But other than Tony Pollard with Tajay Spears out, can you put anyone in Tennessee into your starting lineup?
No, and I don't want to talk about this.
Then only thing I want to talk about, Tony Pollard. How big was the Tony Pollard role?
Yeah, the Tony Pollard role was absolutely phenomenal. We can talk about that, Ian. He today with Tajay Spears out of the lineup had an 88% snap share, 67% of the rushing attempts, and really more than that because there are a few plays there from Mason Rudolph. But if you look at Julius Chestnut, 3 carries, 16 for Tony Pollard. So that gives you a little bit better picture of what happened. And a 72% route participation. So that would be in every down workload for Mr. Tony Pollard. Yeah, we're not that crazy about the offense, but that volume alone makes him a guy that's going to have to be in your lineup pretty much every single week.
I always thought Julius would get into the hot dog business with his brother, but I guess he'll take a third string running back on the Titans. That was a bad joke. I'm sorry, guys. Anyway, Calvin Ridley did have a team high 9 targets, 112 unrealized air yards, but as we're finding out, much more of the prayer yard variety than anyone would prefer. How quickly things don't quite change for Ridley. So DeAndre Hopkins, congrats to all you guys out there that, have more receiving yards than him, which is pretty much everyone, -2 yards on just 1 target. Was he playing the full game, Dwain?
Yeah, it was pretty much like what we've seen these last few weeks. His route participation was only at 56%. So it got up to last week, it got higher than that. So yeah, I don't know what to say about Hopkins.
Trade him. That's what I want to say. Send him to Kansas City.
Yeah, send him to Kansas City. I think it's going to be hard to trade a guy whenever you let everyone know that he had a slight MCL tear heading into the season and he's old and he's got too much money on his contract. But yeah, good luck.
Other than that, though, we got a serious trade bargain coming our way. So let's move on to the Packers taking down the Texans 24-22. Nice late game drive by Jordan Love to help get the game-winning field goal. Houston did cover as 3-point dogs, and the under, unfortunately, cashed here at 47.5. So mentioned the Jordan Love game. It's starting to be called, I think, Dwayne, the Jordan Love experience. I saw a hilarious meme where it was like the angel on one shoulder was Aaron Rodgers and the devil was Brett Favre telling him, like, F it, just throw the ball downfield. And we got a little bit of all that today. 220 yards, 3 touchdowns, but also a pair of interceptions that, probably shouldn't have thrown. But then again, Dwayne, you see some of the throws he does make, and you can understand why. I mean, that touchdown down to seam to Tucker Kraft, absolutely ridiculous. A week ago, he had a 4th down conversion, the smallest of windows to Christian Watson over the middle. This dude has never seen a throw he cannot pull off. And to his credit, man, just to make a lot of them happen. So, we love the passing production in Green Bay. Jordan Love, consistent, mid-tier, if not upside QB1 at this point. Love all that. However, as we found out, Dwayne, when all 4 wide receivers are healthy and active like they were today, sometimes can be a bit challenging to figure out which one's going to produce the most in fantasy land.
Yeah, it is tough. Real quick, I'll say on Love, he's got multiple touchdowns in every game. So he's got at least 2 in every game. He's thrown 4 twice. He's thrown 3 once, which was today. He's got a 389-yard passing performance. And so it's like, man, the high end range of this guy's outcomes are really good. And every week, Jordan Love is giving you fantasy points. So I get it. There is a little bit of YOLO going on, the back and forth with this game. But Ian, I think we're getting to the point with Jordan Love where it's really hard to think about him not being a mid-range QB1 every single week. I know it's one of those scenarios where a lot of times we want to rank like CJ Stroud above him. We want to rank Joe Burrow above him. But I feel like that's the range really where now Jordan Love is entered into that conversation. Like he's been good enough, consistently enough, at least from a fantasy point standpoint, that it's hard to not think of him that way. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, because, all right, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. They just have that rushing production that we're not going to ever get from Jordan Love. After that, why should we have Stroud or Burrow?
I agree. So I think he's right there, and it'll come down to the matchups and things every week. Might determine what that order looks like, but that's where Jordan Love's got to be.
Love is number 1 since week 1 of last season in games with multi-touchdowns and also 3+ through the air. So certainly backing up all that chatter about him truly belonging at the top of these leaderboards. But yes, Dwayne, now to these wide receivers. Got a touchdown from Dontavian Wicks in a game that pretty much no one expected him to play. And if you had him, you certainly rage benched him after the performance last week and, the one before that as well. So nice performance from him on a 30-yard pearl down the sideline. Also got 94 yards and 8 catches on a team high 10 targets from Romeo Doubs. Dobbs. But surely, I mean, how did they go off when we had all reliable Jaden Reed doing his thing? Oh, no, wait, he dudded with 10 scoreless yards on just 2 catches. So we also, of course, had Christian Watson out there. Dwain looked healthy last week. All of a sudden couldn't get going. What is the rhyme or reason to this Packers wide receiver room? I know a lot of us would love to hear it.
Yeah, I can't really tell you, to be honest. I can tell you to some extent. Like, Jaden Reed's going to play the slot. He's going to go about an 80% route participation every week, which is not high enough to be a wide receiver, a high-end wide receiver one all year. We've talked about how the guy was due for regression, but that's still, like, we like him because he's going to make his big plays. He gets involved on the run game, all those sort of things. So Jaden Reed's going to still end up being fine for you. You just had to know that he couldn't continue on the pace that he's on. But we also just talked about Jordan Love, a guy that's throwing multiple touchdowns every week. So Jaden Reed's still going to be fine. He's going to be alive. You just got to adjust your expectations a little bit. Then you have Romeo Dobbs playing the other full-time role on the outside. Actually, he's getting more, route participation than anybody else. Dobbs is just someone that's tricky because he's not a high-end target earner, but in some weeks he is, Ian. In some weeks, Dobbs does come through with these big games. I've witnessed one of them personally right in front of me in a time whenever I was crying and drinking too much beer, spent too much money on tickets at Jerry World. But Dontavian Wicks and Christian Watson, that role looks to be split right now between these two guys. So early in the year, it was Watson. Then Wicks started carving away playing time. Then we had the Christian Watson injury. It was Wicks for a game. Then we get Christian Watson back before we thought we would get him back. And it's back to a split situation between those two. So today, 50% route participation for Christian Watson, 47% for Dontavian Wicks. But I have to give a hat tip to Wicks, man. Again, he outplays Christian Watson, and he's pretty much outplayed Christian Watson every single game they've been out there together. Scored 13.8 fantasy points, 1.5 today for Christian Watson. And that's sad because I really like Christian Watson. It was crazy today, Ian. I actually had someone come to me on my Twitter timeline and say, "Can you say one positive thing about Christian Watson?" I'm like, man, I wish you knew me in another time. Because I like Christian Watson. I really do.
Love the guy, yeah.
Yeah, but the challenge is, like, he's not getting the targets and stuff right now. So it's an issue. This is Wicks' third game in a row where he's been healthy, that he's led the team in targets per route run. So here's the takeaway. You put all this back together, Jaden Reed, borderline wide receiver one, still going to give you really big boom games, but you have to know these kind of games are in play. Romeo Dobbs is going to be a boom bust wide receiver 4 whenever Love decides just to chunk it up down there and give him a chance. That's the kind of things that, Romeo Dobbs can come through with those kind of plays. I'll be honest, I don't blame people if they don't want to roster Christian Watson right now. I think you have to have an injury to Dontavian Wicks for him to come through for you. Wicks, I would prefer to hold in. I would still prefer to not let him go because of that last fact that I mentioned to you. His targets per route run and the last 3 games when healthy are still better than everyone else on the team. And that happened again today. So I still think there's a chance that Dontavian Wicks is like the next best player on the team to Jaden Reed. And I think that could still eventually open up more playing time. Today, he was playing through a shoulder injury. So not saying to put Dontavian Wicks into your lineups, but I do think that he's worth keeping somewhere on your bench.
Would mention that with Jaden Reed. Again, only 10 scoreless yards, but he did drop a deep bomb that would have been good for 45. So certainly seen him make
that. Was that the deep crosser? Or was that okay? Yeah. Okay.
I had to die for it, but hits in between the numbers. You kind of expect him to come down.
No, that's why I was asking if you were counting that one or not. Because if not, I was going to say, well, then maybe there were 2. Yeah. So I saw that one. Okay.
Other Pats game highlight, Josh Jacobs, first career receiving touchdown. Dwain, what a wild stat. Had the NFL record for the most receptions without a touchdown, 211, before he finally found pay dirt there. So good to see him again, getting back with kind of a boom-ish performance here after a lot of weeks where we saw the utilization, but just not enough of the production come around. Continue to fire him up as a weekly RB1. Also, Tucker Kraft continuing to make a name for himself in that mid to low end tight end 1 conversation. Had the sweet diving touchdown and shut off some of that patented yak ability with a nice stiff arm on a previous play. So that is the Packers. Now on the other sideline, Dwain, not, a good performance by this passing game. In fact, some could call it atrocious. 86 passing yards by CJ Stroud. When Anthony Richardson does that, he gets a lot of mean names called his way. Not saying people are necessarily backing up CJ Stroud after this performance, but I'm just saying, Dwain, I think Stroud's awesome, and we've watched the film. He's a very, very, very good quarterback, but some of the ways he's perceived doesn't exactly stack up to, let's face it, middle of the tier passing numbers this year.
Yeah, I honestly didn't think this kind of performance was possible for CJ Stroud. Like, I could see him having a bad game, but not being able to get to 100 yards passing, like, I really didn't think without an injury that he could have this kind of game. I'm honestly chalking this up to
Bobby Slowick.
Random variance, and I'm throwing this game in the trash can. I still think that CJ Stroud is a tremendous player. I do think, to your point, that looking at him in fantasy points per game, when we look at what he's done historically, you brought this up, in the preseason. You're like, hey guys, are we too high on CJ Stroud? Whenever you go back and look at those games that he played in, that he fully participated. Yeah, he had some big blow up games, but it wasn't like, he was a 22 fantasy point per game kind of guy. He wasn't Baker Mayfield, Ian, was what you were telling people. He wasn't Baker Mayfield. And so I agree with that sentiment, but I still think he's one of the best young, passers in the game. So I'm going to give him a pass here and hope they get this thing rolling. Stephon Diggs had a 37% target share today. What's a 37% target share worth when your quarterback throws for under 90 yards? 7.3 PPR points. And you're happy to take it because Tank Dell got a 0. Tank Dell had a 21% target share, but was not able to haul in any of his 4 targets, Mr. Hartitz. So, again, we'll just kind of swipe it aside. Very disappointing, though, because Tank Dell's in most starting lineups today. We know Stephon Diggs is in all lineups. And even Dalton Schultz, like, if you read, the sickos last week, you got Dalton Schultz in your lineup, and I'm sorry. I mean, he had a 76% route participation.
Wait,
like
he led the team in receiving.
I know, but it was still, I know he did. Yeah, I guess I got it right. It's all on CJ Stroud, but he only gave you 3.8 fantasy points. So not really what I was going for with trying to give people the sicko start of the week.
I will say that Diggs' performance, especially disappointing, given he wanted all that smoke in the pregame with Jair Alexander and the Green Bay Packers, at least for one afternoon, could not really pack that up. You mentioned the Tank Dell goose egg. Would have been a lot cooler if very early in the game he had not let a potential 11-yard touchdown bounce off his hands and fall incomplete. Was a sheesh. Not the most egregious one, but we literally saw him make almost that exact same touchdown catch last week. Alas, couldn't get it done this time around. So cool stat here from Fantasy Points Ryan Heath. Fun follow on the old Twitter sphere if you're into that kind of thing. But the Texans had 10 first and 10s across their final 3 drives, including one negated by penalty. Bobby Slowick called a run play 9 out of those 10 times, Dwain. So again, there are certain easy buttons as an OC that you can press. Simply hasn't been the case for Slowick in the majority of these 2 seasons now with the Texans. However, when you do have a run first offense like that, Dwain, guess who it's usually pretty good for? The running back, and that was the case for Joe Mixon today. 115 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. When this dude's healthy, man, I don't think you need more than one hand to count the number of running backs you want ahead of him in fantasy.
For sure. Did Ryan give the success rate on those? Or did you see anything?
No.
I'll talk about Joe Mixon while you're looking that up. And the reason I bring it up is because people used to talk about this with the Cowboys. There are some teams that they get 5 or 6 yards every time on first down when they run it. Well, then that's okay. Yeah. Like if you're running on first down, if you're putting yourself ahead of the down and distance on the next play, that's the main thing that matters. We know passing gives you a better chance to do that. Why? Well, the average yards per pass attempt in the league is 7.2. The average yards per rushing in the league is 4.2. So do the math, people. Like you're more likely to gain more yards with a pass. But if it's incomplete, you get 0 yards. So once you factor that in, if you've got a really good running game, that can be a closer equation than what a lot of people think. Now, I would suspect that with CJ Stroud and with the weapons that the Texans have, and maybe the real missing ingredient here is obviously Nico Collins. Maybe that changes things a little bit. I would suspect that throwing the ball would still be better. But to your point, Joe Mixon has been fantastic. Ooh. Dude had 69% of the snaps again today, 78% of the freaking rushing attempts, 25 carries, man. 25 carries for 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. So 45% route participation. If we look at Mr. Mixon now in his 3 healthy games, Ian, 26.8, 27.2, and 26.4 fantasy points. This is a high-end running back one that we should be ranking in the top 5 pretty much every single week, unless they're playing against a brick wall. Like it's going to be really hard to keep Mixon out. He's getting all the carries. It's an offense we still feel good about. I know that they had a bad game today, guys, but when you look at the Texans, I still think at a minimum, Ian, like what's the worst you would say the Texans are? A top 10 offense and still a chance to be like a top 6, top 3, in my opinion. So Mixon to the freaking moon. If you have Joe Mixon, you should be elated. He could be one of the absolute steals of the draft. I know we haven't heard people talking about that because he got hurt. And so that kind of took him off. But now looking at these 3 games, man, like this is Derrick Henry stuff. This is what people are getting from Derrick Henry. This is Saquon Barkley. Yeah. And you got him in round 5 or 6 of your fantasy draft, not round 2. This is amazing.
credited with a week high 9 missed tackles forced on the ground. So really wasn't just,
Looking
a
good.
product of the volume. Looked good out there. Tried to do the Lambeau leap after one of his touchdowns and got rejected. Shout out to the Packers fans not allowing that to happen, but got a shoot out there. So next week, Dwayne, Texans versus the Colts. You wanted to rank Mixon as the RB1, man. I wouldn't call you crazy.
Bro, yeah, we're going to be ranking all the Texans high next week. It's just
Packers
facing the Colts, but
Packers are at the Jaguars too. So yeah.
Oh wow,
wheels up.
Those are two great matchups. And real hat tip to the Packers today, man. Getting Jair Alexander back, him being healthy. I know there was a dust up before the game between Stephon Diggs and those guys, and so the Packers defense is a different defense when they've got Jair Alexander. That allows you to do so much with the rest of your coverage scheme. Whenever you have a guy that whenever you want to, you can have him lock a certain other player down. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. The Packers have been a pretty soft defensive matchup, but we might have to change our minds a little bit now with Jair Alexander back in the lineup.
It's a great point. They did take CJ Stroud down for 4 different sacks. Again, just 22 points. Kudos to that Packers defense. A great effort here this Sunday. Moving on, the Colts took down the Dolphins 16-10. Indy covered as 4-point favorites. The under did cash with relative ease at 44. So got the Anthony Richardson start, Dwayne, but sadly it was on the lower end of what we were hoping for. 56 rushing yards helped keep the floor up, as it's known to do in Fantasyland, but just 10 for 24 passing for 129 scoreless yards. So in his first 3 full career starts, he finished as the exact QB4 each and every time. The last 3, assuming today finishes outside the top 20, he will have finished outside the top 20. So I really wish, Dwayne, we could just get a regular QB10 sort of performance here. It's always seemingly amazing, or it's looking like, how is this guy an NFL quarterback? But at least we got those 14 rush attempts, because earlier in this year, we weren't even getting that volume that led us to draft so much of him in the first place.
Yeah, look, I mean, the rushing attempts were there. That you can't even say it really saved you. It saved you from absolutely, getting obliterated is what it saved you from. But to your point, like we need some form of consistency from Richardson in the passing game. Like I would take a 55% completion rate. Like, can we get 55? We were at 42% today, man. Like he's at 48.5% on the season. And it's not just himself that he's dragging down. Josh Downs, who we had just looked at with freaking, Joe Flacco as being a guy that, oh my God, this guy might be a wide receiver too, absolutely bombs today. You can't have these guys in your lineups. They are boom bust plays with Anthony Richardson at quarterback. So Richardson, in my opinion, like the numbers are going to level out. I'm not going to repeat them. You guys have heard me say them 1,000 times, but essentially guys with a profile like Richardson, you go back and you look at the data, and this includes Tim Tebow guys. So really bad passers, Taysom Hill, really bad passers. They're usually still top 10 quarterbacks. And my guess is by the end of the year, that's still where Richardson finishes on a fantasy points per game. But man, Ian, these duds is not something that we thought would be so low all the time. It is a very boom bust nature. And it's like you said, could we just get a middle of the road performance, Mr. Richardson? Like if we could get something in the middle here or there, it'd make me feel a lot better, because there's massive bust potential every week. And it's for the entire offense when Richardson is at the helm.
And it just looks so bad because the layups are nowhere to be found. He's actually, going into this game, he was more accurate and averaged more yards per attempt on throws, 20 plus yards downfield, than Flacco. But that comparison falls completely off a cliff when we start looking at the underneath and intermediate passes. Really, really damning film with some of them.
And deep passing stats are not sticky, period. Yeah. Year over year, they hold no signal. Game over game, it's even worse. So, like, I get what you're saying. Like, the deep ball, theoretically, and when watching Richardson, it is the best part of his game, but it's a very undependable part of the game is what I'm saying. So it's not going to be a surprise when that element of his attack doesn't come through, because that's what we should expect. It's just a very up and down kind of thing.
Again, no one really had to deal with it more than Josh Downs, who has now never reached 6 fantasy points in a game Anthony Richardson has played in full. Shout out to the legend Mike Clay over at ESPN for that stat. So next week, Dwayne, they're facing Houston. Like, we've seen some nice performances from Richardson against that very defense. But that said, no teams are on bye in week 8, which is absolutely ridiculous. I don't know who decided that should be a thing. Can we rank Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, or Josh Downs in the top 50? I wrote down top 36, man, but I really think 50 is a better question.
No.
Wow.
Look, we probably will. There'll probably be one of them in there, but you're not going to feel comfortable starting any of them. That's the point. Like, we play in guillotine leagues now, and I recommend everyone. Changed my life. Oh my God. not having to go grind out Cedric Tillman. You know, how about next week Garrett Wilson being on your waiver wire? How does that sound, guys? Like it's they're guys that I would not want anywhere near my lineup in a guillotine league. That's what I would say. And I have Pittman on my guillotine league at FantasyLife. No, on my bench, not anywhere near the starting lineup. I have Anthony Richardson too. I don't ever start him. I start Joe Burrow. So it's tough, man.
To get Tyler Goodson taking over the backfield with another missed game from Jonathan Taylor, who, I mean, just from what we've heard in the practice participation, Dwain, I'd love to think he's going to be back next week. He's already missed several weeks with that mild. It was mild, Dwain, the mild high ankle sprain, but I'm not sure when that's going to happen. So did we see a true shift in utilization for Tyler Goodson?
Sermon still led the team in snaps at 53%, 48% for Ty Goodson, but Goodson did edge him out. 39% of the team's rushing attempts versus 22% for Sermon. So 14 carries to 8. And then you had Anthony Richardson out there getting 14 carries as well. What would Anthony Richardson have been without his 14 carries? He scored 18.8 fantasy points. He would have scored like one fantasy point.
Too soon.
Yeah. So looking at Sermon, he did take over the passing down. This is bizarro world. I can't tell you what the Colts are doing. They change it every week. So 41% route participation for Trey, the rolling ball of knives, Sermon. Tyler Goodson, 21% route participation rate. But I just have to say, watching the Colts these last 2 to 3 games, Tyler Goodson's the better player. Like Tyler Goodson is the better player than Trey Sermon. I don't necessarily think it's close at this point. So if we do have another game without Jonathan Taylor, I would see Tyler Goodson does need to be the name that we're talking about as mid-range running back 3. You know, I don't think we can call either of these guys borderline running back 2s anymore because they're just taking enough away from each other.
Especially not in a week where we're getting all 32 squads in action.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Dolphins, specifically what to expect in week 8.
We have to.
Because, wait a minute. Tua expected to be back in week 8. Can we get back behind it, Dwain? Home?
Yes.
The Panthers. We're just back. Forget the last month happened.
Just forget it. Yeah. Like we don't. Yeah. If Tua's back, you're going with it. Like we know what Tua can do. Obviously, there's the risk. We don't want Tua to get hurt again. Tua, please don't scramble. Just protect yourself, man. Don't do anything that. Yeah. Like just go into the fetal position. I mean, no one's going to blame you. So if Tua's back, I'm going to look at the Dolphins just the way we've been looking at them all along. I will say one little slight potential positive here, Ian, this week that surprised me. Well, no, that's number 2. So we'll come back to that one. That's a good one. Good call. That should be it. That should have been my lead, but it was actually the fact that Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, you and I have talked about this before, they get like 80% route participation. And when things is going really well, like it's fine. But you start to notice if you're watching these games, you're like, Tyreek Hill's not out there on 3rd down. Jalen Waddle's not out there on 3rd and 8. Sometimes both of them together are not on the field on a 3rd down. And that was something that was driving me crazy. I'm like, you're trying to get these guys breathers to keep them fresh, to go out here and be in motion all the time and run wind sprints. But when it gets to 3rd and 7, you just tell those 2 guys, get your asses on the field. I don't care that you just ran 40 yards. You're not tapping your helmet and coming off the sideline. Today, 97% route participation for both of them. No clue if that's anything that will stick. But, man, if we ever had it where Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle were at 90% route participation and a healthy Dolphins offense, guys, you're going to get even more fantasy points than what you were getting before. So, JAX-NE is to your point, Ian, really is the lead story here. 84% route participation today. Ooh. Came through with a 32% target share to lead the team. If you guys were watching that game, you saw at least a couple of them were design plays to JAX-NE where they're getting in the screen, letting him do the things after the catch. So yeah, led the team with 22.6 fantasy points. Here's what I'm going to say. Coming out of the bye, there's a chance, Ian, that maybe they did decide that really JAX-NE was the guy they need to have on the field more. I will say historically, this archetype of tight end, more the receiving tight end, is a guy that's up and down and all over the board in Mike McDaniel's offense. We saw it with Mike Gesicki. We've even seen it in the years previous after that. So I don't think we can be all in on it, but if we got another week where we saw this again, like that could be really big for Jonnu Smith. Obviously, if you had to start him this last weekend, you loved it.
I would love to buy into the idea that McDaniel spent his bye week looking for ways to get JAX-NE more involved, but that would also imply that he had a plan coming out of the bye. And I have no idea how you play 30 minutes of football and don't throw the ball to Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle once, Dwain. So again, a bit tougher to wrap my mind around that. But again,
I agree.
Tua coming back fingers crossed, things will get back to being high flying in Miami, because Lord knows, guys, 8 games without Tua over the last 2 seasons. Dolphins have scored 17, 16, 21, 11, 3, 12, 15, and just 10 points. So sad times indeed. However, Dwain, we did get the return of Devon Achane, team high 15 carries for 77 yards. And just saying by the eye test, man, looked like he had a little bit of his burst back, something that, at least again, as far as I could tell, wasn't quite the same while he was playing through that early season high ankle sprain.
Yeah, and this is an important data point for us because it's really the first time since week 1 where we just had a few snaps before Raheem Mostert got hurt that we had him and Mostert healthy. So we could see what would this potential backfield split look like. And it was 57% of the snaps to Achane, 34% to Mostert, 42% of the rushing attempts to Achane, 31% to Mostert, 68% route participation to Achane, and 29% to Mostert, and a 14% target share. So not getting 60% of the rushing attempts, but I think he's going to be somewhere between 40 and 50% and getting all that passing down work. So he really is the lead back, Ian. This is the high end of where we could project this heading into the season. When we talked about range of outcomes, we said, well, what if, he's in that 40 to 50%? What if he gets to 50% of the carries and he gets a 60% route participation? I think that's kind of the range that we're in now. I know we got that little brief period where he was getting all the work when Mostert was hurt, but I think you're okay, man. Getting Achane with Tua back and a little bit of slightly lesser role than what we got for a couple of weeks, but in a healthy offense and still in a bigger role than what we originally thought he might be in. Man, I think that Achane with Tua back is still going to give you running back 1 performances quite often. He could still be a top 6 guy. It's going to be tough because so many guys now, like the picture's different. Joe Mixon that we just talked about, where Saquon Barkley's at. I mean, where Derrick Henry's at. Now there are so many other names. It's hard to say, okay, Achane's going to be a top 6 running back every week because we've had so many other guys that have proven like they belong in that conversation. But I think that having Achane as anything less than a low end running back 1 is probably going to be, I don't want to say it's wrong. People can do what they want, but like for me, it would be tough for me to have him as anything worse than a low end running back 1. And that's going to give you high end running back 1 every week if Tua gets the offense back to where it was before.
By the way, I did accidentally misspoke. They have the Arizona Cardinals next week. Still a good matchup, though. That again, Tua
wow.
back.
Big misspeak.
I know, man. Shame on me. I'll watch the film and get better. All right, guys, moving right along. We had the Lions take down the Vikings in a thriller 31-29. Nice little late game drive by Jared Goff and company to go ahead and get that game-winning field goal. Detroit closed as 1.5-point dogs. Good job on them for winning outright. Over cash with ease here at 50.5. So another just incredibly efficient game from Jared Goff. Looked like it was going to be tough early on, man. Took 4 sacks with a lot of them coming early in the game. Some holding penalties by the Lions. They were not clicking with a 0-point first quarter, but things quickly got back under control. And at this point, Dwain, 22 for 25, 280 yards with 2 touchdowns. He's completed 76 of his last 91 passes, good for an 84% completion rate. So obviously our one true sun god, one of the major beneficiaries of this, 8 catches on 8 targets today for 112 yards and a touchdown. So really, he has been, Amon-Ra St. Brown, the one just consistent high-end factor in this offense for the better part of the last 3 or 4 years, and we thank him for that. However, Dwain, getting tougher and tougher to really find a second reliable option in this passing game. We know they're going to come and go, but man, Jameson Williams, -4 receiving yards. Sam Laporta, just 1 catch. I mean, my God, at this point, when we look at Laporta, man, 2 or fewer catches in 4 of 6 games this year. Again, we all love St. Brown, but at what point do we have to say Laporta and JMO need to be moved down the ranks? Because, man, this inconsistency can be maddening.
Yeah, so I think we've done a pretty good job, honestly, as a side of not overreacting on the JMO stuff. Like, we've moved him up, but we've really kept him in that low-end wide receiver 2 territory. And I think for the most part across everybody that's talked about him, we've all talked about like his boom-bust, nature, right? That can make him in any week like a top 5 wide receiver, but in any other week could make him, a wide receiver 4 or 5, or today like a wide receiver 1,000. I mean, so he still has not shown that he can be a high-end target earner in this offense. Now he's better than he's been. Like, he's 19-20%, and in an offense that's going to score a lot of fantasy points, that's still going to be okay, but you're just going to have these boom bust games. So I don't necessarily think that he moves, but Laporta, man, we've already moved him down. The challenge for me with him, and get your thoughts on this, like, is how do I move him below low end tight end 1? Like, just because there's no tight ends this year. So it's like, I don't want to move him to a spot that would make anyone think that I'm saying drop him, because there's nothing better to go get on the waiver wire right now. And now, if there ever was, I might do that. But I mean, I've got him down below Tucker Kraft, like, who I think is only coming through on big plays, not a lot of targets, even again today. So it's like,
but what's the difference?
I don't know. I don't know what else to do. Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know what to do with Laporta. I don't know how to push him lower. Obviously, he's hurting people. But name a guy, like, would you want to drop Sam Laporta to pick up Hunter Henry?
No, but
yeah, see,
but
I know.
Would you drop him to pick up David Njoku?
Yeah, but Njoku's pretty much rostered. I think you'd have to look. Maybe I'm wrong.
But you
maybe.
See how quickly you said yes to that, man? We're talking about Sam Laporta here.
No, I know, but I tweeted about this last week. Like, Laporta essentially, is a guy that you can't trust in your lineup. You're just hoping. You're just crossing your fingers and praying. But we also know that he's so good. As soon as you release him, you're going to regret it. And someone else is going to pick him up, and he's going to, who knows? He may not do anything, but he's just good enough that I don't want to pick up Tyler Conklin to start for him. I don't want to start Hunter Henry for him. It's like, I'll just take my lumps where I have Sam Laporta over those options. Yes, I would do it for David Njoku, and I would do it very quickly.
I can't believe I'm saying this, Dwain. Sam Laporta or Cole Kmet?
Right now, Cole Kmet, dude. Ian, I have that decision. I am in a dynasty league right now where we play tight end premium, and I was sad that Cole Kmet was on bye and I had to start Sam Laporta. And I can flex those guys. I don't even flex Sam Laporta anymore. Now I have a pretty loaded team, so I have other guys I can play. But I mean, Sam Laporta, like last year, was like the thing that like set my team apart from everyone else. And so yeah, he's killing me.
Sad times in the Lions tight end.
Hey, real quick, Ian, on Jared Goff, man. The last 3 games, 292 passing yards and 2 Ts, 315 passing yards and 3 Ts, 280 passing yards and 2 Ts. Like, Jared Goff is balling.
Yeah.
and what you mentioned about the incompletions, I'm like,
oh my God,
it's insane. So Jared Goff, man, like every week has got to be in that type. And he's in the QB1 conversation. And I usually have him in that low end QB1, but maybe I need to be a little nicer. The only thing that keeps me from like getting all in on Goff is I also know there will be these games where all 4 of the Lions touchdowns will come via the run. And we saw that early in the season. So like week 1, Goff throws for 217 and 1 touchdown. Week 2 throws for 307, no touchdowns. Week 3 throws for 199. So there are games where they will just lean into the run and they will run the ball, down inside the 5-yard line. And so that's going to make him a little bit more volatile. But at the same time, like Jared Goff playing absolutely at an astronomical level right now.
Call him a system quarterback all you want, but just
Doesn't
realize
matter.
that systems, as Dwain just said, at an astronomical level. So who cares? He's going to be in the MVP conversation by the end of the year, if not the front runner, Dwain. It's just what happens when you are leading.
What happens? It's like the Purdy thing. Yeah,
exactly. When you're leading one of the best teams in the NFL, they look at the quarterback and they will make him run. So my money will be on Lamar Jackson right now, back to back. Why not? Playing better than he did last year, but not to take anything away from Jared Goff. Of course, the running back room, Dwain. My God, Jahmyr Gibbs, 116 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, one of which featured him taking another man's soul in the open field with a sick juke. Also caught 4 passes for 44 receiving yards, which is not something we usually see out of Gibbs, despite, again, the idea. And I do think he can catch the ball well, just hasn't really been a big facet of his game that they've overly, leaned on, because they don't need to. They have a bunch of good receiving talent in Detroit. Week 9 missed tackles for us on the ground. I believe he tied with Joe Mixon on that. And this came with David Montgomery briefly missing some time. Had a knee injury that did not look good, man. Got helped off the field by some trainers. And then Gibbs had that sick touchdown. And Montgomery said, give me my helmet. I'm getting back out there. I am good to go. So with that injury in mind, Dwain, was that more so why we saw Gibbs taking command of the backfield, or really just him, having a great game regardless?
No, I think it was David Montgomery was hurt. I know Montgomery came back to the game, but he was still not playing as much. And Gibbs was playing really well. So they had a chance to really go with the hot hand there. So we'll see what the injury reports say around David Montgomery. I saw several of our awesome Twitter docs out there talking about potential MCL, ACL strain, something. So we'll see if that's something that limits him in practice this week. My guess it will be, in that David Montgomery was playing through it with adrenaline, and we'll see what that means as far as his availability in week 8. But to your point, because of that, Jahmyr Gibbs had a 59% snap share, 60% of the rushing attempts, and 59% route participation, with Montgomery clearly behind him and only 36% of the snaps. 36% of the carries, and 28% of the routes. So if we get a game or we get a couple of games where Jahmyr Gibbs does not have David Montgomery available in
RB1,
the RB1, he's top 3, no doubt. We just talked about it. We say the RB1, and then you're like, oh, well, Joe Mixon gets 75% of the carries, scores 25 fantasy points every game. Oh, forgot about Derrick Henry. Got to talk about Derrick Henry. But yes, he's up there. Like he's one of the top 3 to 5 names that we could talk about.
We had pretty much a 3-game sample last year where Montgomery was out of the picture and Gibbs finished as the overall RB2, the RB1, and the RB2 once again. So look, already posting top 10 numbers in your lineup regardless, but yeah, you should be feeling that much more happy if we do happen to get a couple games of the 3 down Jahmyr Gibbs experience. Over on the other sideline, Dwain, again, not the best performance from Sam Darnold and company. Not necessarily something to go crying about either, though, because again, did manage to get 29 points. And that was we had a scoop and score on the Vikings defense after Montgomery actually lost a fumble out there. And also, I think there's a short field, another point as well. Because again, you would have thought this game, Detroit went up 21-10 at halftime. I thought we were finally going to get the high, back and forth pass attempts, shooting north of 30 game for Sam Darnold, Dwain, but just didn't come to fruition. 22 for 27, though, 259 yards with a touchdown and an interception. Great play by Brian Branch, who is quickly becoming one of the better safeties in the NFL. So again, passing game, more good than bad, and that did feature 81 yards and a touchdown for Justin Jefferson, who previously, that's under his 134-yard average against the Lions. Still a great day, though. Jordan Addison hauled in a 51-yard bomb down the middle of the field. No TJ Hawkinson just yet, which I would presume is a big reason why Jalen Naylor has managed to stay involved as a number 3 as well. So again, don't think we exactly saw many new surprises, Dwain. Would have been a lot cooler if Darnold, boomed in a matchup we thought he was capable with. But looking ahead to next week against the Rams on Thursday Night Football, certainly going to be someone we're going back to well with. I think the bigger question is, what did we see out of this backfield with the returning Aaron Jones fresh off that hip/hamstring injury?
Yeah, we saw someone that dominated. So, this is a guy that had a hip injury that suddenly was a hamstring injury, and we weren't for sure how much he was going to be. What'd you say? A hip strain?
Hip string injury.
A hip string. Oh, wow, dude. Is Julia pregnant? I have to ask you. When you come up with these dad jokes, you might have a baby on the way. I'm just telling you, Hartitz. So Aaron Rodgers, yeah, man, 77% of the snaps, 67% of the rushing attempts, 61% route participation. So right into that role that we've seen him in for the most part of this year, man. Another 20.6 fantasy points, playing in an offense that we love. You talked about Darnold. I get it. He didn't come through with a big smash, but he's still good. He gave you 260 passing yards and a passing touchdown, completed 82% of his passes. Maybe we have to give maybe the Lions secondary is kind of starting to gel.
Yeah.
I know not having Hutchinson could hurt, but for these last 2 to 3 weeks, they haven't been quite the pushover that they were early on. So 260 might not look that bad when we look back at the Lions here in a few weeks. We'll see. We'll see how that works out. So yeah, Aaron Jones, if you've got him, Ian, he's a running back 1 in this offense.
Yeah. Obviously got flamed by the Seahawks, but the Cowboys' performance was incredibly impressive, even if you want to put more of the blame on the Cowboys dudding. Had that bye week and, made those offseason additions with Carlton Davis and some of the draft picks where it would make sense that the secondary does gel as the season goes on. So good call out there, Dwain. And otherwise, yeah, great performance from Aaron Jones. Had that early 34-yard touchdown run where he just looked great. And man, even caught a 15-yard pass on a deep crosser where it was oh man, what wide receiver just made that catch? Oh, it's Aaron Jones because he's actually that good as a receiver out there. Great to see them really leaning into that area of his game. Currently averaging a career high mark in receiving yards. Was at 33 before this one got going. Great to see there. All right, Dwain, some NFC East action. The Eagles stomped down the New York Football Giants 28-3. Philly obviously covering as 3-point faves. The under did cash here at 42. So just 14 pass attempts from Jalen Hurts. Their offensive line looking pretty iffy, I should say, in the first and second quarters of this game in particular. Obviously lost their left tackle, and accordingly, Hurts was sacked 4 times. Threw a beautiful 41-yard bomb to A.J. Brown down the sideline on 4th down. Bold move by the Giants to leave him single Camel covered, and they immediately ate that dust. 89 yards on the day for A.J. Brown. He was the only Eagles player that managed to get anything done through the air. Kenneth Gainwell and Saquon Barkley tied for the next team high in receiving at 11 yards. So goes to show you, Dwain, Devonta Smith, unfortunately, the pretty clear number 2 behind A.J. Brown. Pretty confident he's not going to finish with -2 receiving yards again next week, but I was hoping some of these softer matchups would really open things up for Devonta, but wondering, man, if they even trust that offensive line with how little Hurts has been passing.
Yeah, I think that's the bigger challenge, right? You get ahead today and you don't really need to throw the ball that much. Obviously, A.J. Brown across from you is a major challenge if you're Devonta Smith. Like when we look at the games this year where those two have been available together on the field together, 37% target share for A.J. Brown, 20% for Devonta Smith. Air yards, 62% to A.J. Brown, 14% to Devonta Smith. Fantasy points, 66.4. 31.6 for Devonta Smith. So Smith, like I'm with you. I don't think he's ultimately going to be this bad, but at the same time, you put it all together. You have a team that's willing to run the ball quite often, and you're dealing with another target alpha. You're going to get duds like this from Smith. Now he's got to move inside to the slot. That's really softened up some of the matchups for him, but it's the air yard stuff, Ian. It's almost like a trade-off now. Yeah. I mean, are we really going to use him on just all this shallow stuff? Come on, like Kellen Moore, put him in the slot and let the dude work down the field. Like Devonta Smith is a great separator at all levels. So I'm a little concerned right now that they're like tethering him to the line of scrimmage. Like they're kind of treating him like, a Wan'Dale Robinson, Josh Downs, some of these other guys that we talked about that really caps their upside. I think we could live on like a 23% target share from Devonta Smith and an offense that scores a lot of touchdowns if he's still getting the big plays. And that's the biggest concern I have. And so we'll have to kind of keep an eye on that. But hopefully they'll get back to letting Devonta Smith like run a full route tree and not trying to be so cute with him, because that's definitely a challenge right now.
A.J. Brown, right? Route trees too, man. Leaving a lot to be desired. He's A.J. Brown when you're really good at running vertical routes and slants. Like you don't need to try to reinvent the wheel there. But again, a lot of hype with some of the pre-snap motion stuff for Kellen Moore, which I know they've improved on, because how could they go any lower after what we saw over the last couple of seasons? But again, just not exactly looking like this finely tuned machine out there each and every.
It's not where we thought it would be. Like even Devonta Smith, like he's getting the motion and stuff, but not near to the levels that we had hoped for, nor is AJB. So there's obviously there's some wrinkles going on with the offense, but yes, a lot left to be desired versus what we thought maybe Kellen Moore could do for this offense, in my opinion.
Trendy tight end streamer Grant Calcaterra, 100% of the team's tight end targets, caught it 5 yards. Was he playing a full-time role though, Dwain?
Yeah, 83%. But we told people, like, I'm not trying to say we told you so, but it's just when you have A.J. Brown and you've got Devonta Smith, and then you have a potential third tight end in the equation. Last week, like he was at a 90% route participation. It's tough for a guy named Grant Calcaterra to get many targets when you got Saquon Barkley and these other two dudes. So it's just, it was always a thin play.
On the others, oh, by the way, Saquon Barkley. Yeah, probably should mention that game, Dwain. He kind of had a good one out there. 176 rushing yards and a touchdown. Also chipped in 11 receiving yards, breaking all kinds of tackles along the way. Certainly seemed to take this revenge game personally. So could have had an even bigger day. Got stopped just short of the goal line and then helped push Jalen Hurts into the end zone. Kenneth Gainwell had a similar phenomenon there. So the 2 Jalen Hurts rushing touchdowns, not exactly the toughest in the world, but Saquon, man, again, just such a great game. Certainly someone who would be in the running, if not the 101 if we chose to redraft for the rest of the season today. So great job by Saquon, and I'm sure this Eagles offense in the passing game as well, much bigger days ahead. Again, guys, this schedule.
That's with 2 Jalen push touchdowns. He exactly did what he did.
Yeah, just
it's like,
man, how about this? Let's write a dissertation, Dwain, on how the tush push like creates cracks in team chemistry. That isn't worth it. These running backs are getting pissed off. Come on.
I would be pissed.
If I was in
Saquon seems to be taking it well. I think he's just happy that he just saw the other side of what this looks like. Yeah. And it's the Giants, his old team today. So I think he's happy I think he can be happy at least for a year. But yes, I do agree that, some of these running backs have got to be getting upset. But to be fair, this has been happening to them for years, and the running backs have it wasn't always a quarterback, right? It was more another running back coming in. And I've almost seen the opposite, where running backs are more willing to tap their helmet and like let the other guy come in. And we as fantasy managers, we're actually the ones that the dissertation needs to be on. We are the ones losing our minds, probably more so than the running backs.
all jokes aside, it's a great play, and the Eagles continue to win far more football games than not. So kudos to them, and kudos to them for inventing the tush push. If teams have such a problem with it, they should be able to stop it. So Bengals, Jaguars, Cowboys, Commanders, and Rams over these next 5 weeks, Dwayne. Hopefully we see them really start clicking at the highest level we know is possible. And then again, these 28 points, all of a sudden we're talking about 40 plus. Over with the Giants. God, can you imagine this offense scoring 40 plus? Because I can't offensive line complete train.
Not even with Drew Lock?
Maybe with Drew Lock. But unfortunately, Brian Dable confirmed that Daniel Jones is still the starting QB. Look, I don't think you can really put this one on Daniel Jones. Took 7 sacks out there. No Andrew Thomas holding down the left tackle spot clearly was a big issue. But man, 99 yards and just 21 pass attempts. Malik Neighbors, dud 41 scoreless yards despite getting 8 targets. Wan'Dale Robinson, dud 23 scoreless yards. Yeah, got the 6 receptions, PPR. Gotta love that. 9 targets. Long of 6 yards for Wan'Dale Robinson. How is that possible? But yeah, just a sad performance, Dwayne. I would like to think we won't get too many more of them. But this looked like the New York Giants during the first month of last season. And when that happened, nobody was playable.
Well, this looked like the defense we thought maybe we were drafting from the Eagles, or was it just that they played the Giants? I mean, they were coming off the bye week. They're well rested. When you look at the Eagles front seven, you would assume they could get more pressure than what they have been getting. And they did today. They really got to Daniel Jones. However, I don't think we overreact here. I think overall, I think the Giants are better than what we thought they were going to be, and I still think that continues. This was a very rough game. It was by far their worst game. But Malik Neighbors still had a 30% target share, so we know ultimately most games he's still going to come through with that. These sort of things happen. I mean, he just only came up with 4 catches on his 8 targets, 41 yards, like you mentioned. Same thing for Wan'Dale Robinson, had a 33% target share. You were okay, I guess, in PPR leagues. But overall, I still think you're going to be fine with the Giants. I think instead of them being a potential terrible offense, I think it's a below average offense. And I think we can live with that for the purposes of mainly we care about it for Malik Neighbors, and maybe we care about it for this backfield. And there was a really interesting development here today. So we know this is the first game where we get Devin Singletary back to go with Tyrone Tracy, who has played really well over these last 2 games. And Tracy today, man, had 67% of the snaps to only 22% for Devin Singletary. And I actually looked at that for the plays with just Daniel Jones on the field as well. And it was even more, 72% for Tracy, 21% for Devin Singletary. Rushing attempts with Daniel Jones in the game, 40% to Tyrone Tracy, 27% to Devin Singletary. Obviously, Daniel Jones had some of those as well. 76% route participation to Tyrone Tracy and 14% to Devin Singletary. So it was, but once you put the splits on there with just Daniel Jones, it slightly made it a little bit more. But the point being 72% of the snaps. So I think what has happened potentially here, and now Devin Singletary was still a little banged up this week. We did find out well ahead of the game that he was going to play. So I don't want to completely rule out the fact that injury was maybe why we had a little bit more of a limited role.
Dable said they were going to ease him in.
Okay. Yeah. And they will also said Tyrone Tracy had earned a larger role. So the truth is probably somewhere in the middle of all these things. But the big thing is Tyrone Tracy handled all the passing network today. Ooh. He had a 76% route participation versus only 14% for Devin Singletary. So that was a major development. Again, I don't think we can come out and say Tyrone Tracy is for sure the lead back. But when I go to project this backfield next weekend, I'm going to project Tyrone Tracy with a slight lead. Like I'm going to have him closer than these splits today. But I think after this, I have to slightly lean in the FantasyLife projection model slightly to Tyrone Tracy over Singletary. And who knows, maybe it'll end up being more split. But right now, I think this is a potential big positive for Tyrone Tracy.
Week 9 against Washington, week 10 against Carolina. Maybe those could be booms for Tyrone Tracy. Dwayne, week 8 at Pittsburgh. I don't want to start Tyrone Tracy.
I don't either, but Pittsburgh is looking more and more vulnerable, like across the board, the more they play, better teams. So we'll see. Like Breece Hall already got him for one tonight. Ooh. Now Breece Hall's a stud, but yeah. Yeah. Breece Hall, Tyrone Tracy, what's the difference?
They're the same picture. So, okay, hopefully we get more again going on from that Giants offensive line. We've seen better days. I'm willing to write this one off. As Dwayne said, Eagles front seven certainly pretty good. Them, getting a bit better rested hopefully helped out that cause. But yeah, Tyrone Tracy, nice little bump, and Malik Neighbors, we still do trust in his wide receiver one goodness. So, guys, we got 3 more late afternoon games to get to. But first, a quick word to our friends over at DraftKings. A chill in the air, leaves falling to the ground, and football every weekend. That is what fall is all about. And you can make each weekend even more exciting by getting into the action with our partners at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. And right now, all new customers who bet $5 will instantly get $200 in bonus bets. All you got to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using our promo code FantasyLife. The crown is yours. Again, that is $200 in bonus bets instantly. And you can stay in on the action and use your $200 in bonus bets to bet anytime touchdowns on DraftKings. Again, DraftKings is the place to bet touchdowns. Sports betting is not yet available in your state. Don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use our promo code FantasyLife and bet just $5 on any wager. Get $200 back in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code FantasyLife only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The first place Commanders took down the Panthers 40-7, covering as big 10-point favorites, and the under cashed just by a little bit at 51. And Dwain, they did so without the services of Jaden Daniels, which makes this whole thing even crazier to wrap your mind around. Only had 2 pass attempts out of Daniels. Now he actually helped out his fantasy managers. You would have expected to get a big 0 in this one. Somehow ran for 50 yards on the back of a 46-yard rush before he left this game with a rib injury. So not sure what it is just yet. Dan Quinn declined to give a big comment after the game. We did see Daniels, join the sideline for the second half, smiling in street clothes. So we'll see what happens. Tentatively, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a super long-term injury. That said, Dwain, we know with someone like Daniels how big of a factor that rushing upside is to his game. If he is going to be playing through a rib injury, would make sense if they're going to, again, maybe lean off that a little bit, particularly with how well the rest of the offense continues to groove.
Yeah, that's definitely going to hurt. We'll have to monitor the practices and everything this week, but Jaden Daniels, even, let's say he's questionable all next week, but we know he's going to play. And the main concern is just potential re-aggravation. Like it's not like you have to start him. It's not like we're going to push him way down the ranks. Maybe that means he's QB4 instead of QB2 or QB1. So I will be interested though to see, because I was watching whenever he left the field and the whole deal, went to the locker room, came back, actually came out and tried to warm up and couldn't do anything. That's kind of concerning. Like, I get it. Oh, he's fine. He's fine. We did the imaging. He couldn't throw a ball. And then later they said, oh, it's because the game's out of hand. No, they were trying to bring him back in the game and he couldn't do it. So I'm, again, and maybe I'm jaded because the injury reporting and what these coaches tell us, like, honestly, like the NFL needs to crack down on this, but whatever. I'm not going to sit here and bitch about it. But
we'll bitch about it more.
What all these coaches say, like what they mean is something different for every single one of them, and week to week and day to day, and it's just all over the board. So it'd just be nice to have some consistency. But he's a guy that obviously you're starting. But what I would be the most concerned about, obviously, is all the weapons, because I don't buy it. I do not buy Marcus Mariota. I have seen Marcus Mariota long enough to know not to buy it. Okay, so I know what he did today, and I give him a hat tip today. But if Marcus Mariota for some reason is the starter, Terry McLaurin is a boom bust low end wide receiver 3. That's all I can do. I can't give him any more than that. Now, you get Jaden back, even if we were worried about him being hurt, I'm fine. Terry McLaurin, he's going to be in the wide receiver 2 conversation like he has been.
NFL certainly crossing those fingers so we can get the Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams matchup going next week. But yeah, guess what? If we do have to, unfortunately, watch Mariota against that Bears defense, not going to be pretty. But as you said, Dwain, he certainly did have a great afternoon today. 18 for 23, 205 yards and a pair of touchdowns, one to each of his tight ends and Zach Ertz. And with his first catch of his career and accordingly touchdown, Ben Sinnett only took until week 7. That was a hell of a time to be alive in best ball summer. Again, plenty of the year still going on. If he goes for 2 touchdowns and 150 yards in week 17, I guess that is all that matters, Dwain. But good to see Zach Ertz again find the end zone as the tight end 1 in Washington. And Terry McLaurin, even without Jaden Daniels, caught all 6 of his targets for 98 scoreless yards. So certainly didn't kill you by any stretch of the imagination there. With this backfield, though, we did get Brian Robinson back. And just judging by the box score and what we saw, Dwain, seemed like he was much closer to his usual role after being more of a short yardage specialist last time we saw him.
Yeah, there's a few concerning trends here with Washington, but I'm looking at the first 7 drives. The best I can tell right now, looking at this live, because these later games, guys, whenever they come in and we're doing the show, Like they're just finalizing, like as we're doing the show. So I'm literally reacting to Ian like as he's throwing these things to me. And so I'm trying to find the cutoff where I think the starters pretty much left the game for the Commanders because this was a blowout. And so I'm looking at the first 7 drives, and it looks like 46% of the rushing attempts went to Brian Robinson and 52% of the snaps. And then we had 15% of the rushing attempts go to Austin Eckler, 12% to Jaden Daniels over that stretch. And then we had Jeremy McNichols out there for 4%. So yeah, closer to what we had seen early in the season for Washington. He was typically around 50 to 60% of the team's rushing attempts. And then we had Austin Eckler getting the passing down work, which is what we saw today. Eckler had 61% route participation, but only 15% of the rushing attempts. Again, if I have this cutoff right, which I think I do for the drives of the starters. But my concern here is like back to Terry McLaurin. And I had noticed this trend over the last couple of weeks, but I was like, okay, maybe it's just something with an injury or something. But Terry McLaurin's not been playing like 90% of the routes anymore. Like Terry McLaurin today had 74% route participation in these drives with the starters over these last several games. I'm pulling up the utilization report on the site right now. Terry McLaurin, his route participation to start the year, 88%, 95%, 94%, starting in week 4, 81%, week 5, 78%, week 6, 79%. So now we got another data point that's even lower than that. And so the Commanders are rotating a ton of guys, Ian, and one guy that you talked about last week, Noah Brown, he's getting more playing time. Olamide Zaccheaus is getting playing time. Luke McCaffrey is getting playing time. Diami Brown is getting playing time. And now this apparently is also at the cost of Terry McLaurin, and which is not ideal. Now it's still a really good offense, so it's going to be hard to move Terry down much. But if we ever want Terry to have that true wide receiver 1 upside on a weekly basis, like we need him up around 90%. Like he's playing in an offense that's good enough to do that. But this is definitely concerning for me.
I'm just trying to look ahead to hopefully maybe help people out, Dwain, if they do have Jaden Daniels potentially missing this next week's game. Out of, let's see, Sam Darnold versus the Rams, Tua versus the Cardinals. These might be stretches to be on waiver wires. Caleb versus the Commanders. That's almost it. We're not starting both.
Yeah, I like all. You would be happy to play all 3 of those.
I'm just not sure if they can get them.
I mean, right now, Sam Darnold, I'm looking it up. Sam Darnold right now is available in Yahoo leagues. In Yahoo leagues, he's 64% rostered. So, I mean, not that available. You guys can do the math on that.
What's Tua?
Tua is the one that I told my son to pick up earlier because he has Jaden.
Yeah, probably.
So when we looked at his waiver wire, Tua was available, 45% rostered. So 55% of the time, it works all the time if you're looking to get Tua on your team. Caleb Williams was doable a few weeks ago, but then he had the big games and people picked him back up. So 72% rostered on him. I think the name you're going to be most likely looking at is Drake May, and he's got 2 tough matchups, Ian.
That's what I'm saying.
So it's a matter of I think the question is, would you, if it was really a gross league where there's nothing there, and let's be honest, a lot of people are carrying 2 quarterbacks these days because there's been so many quarterback injuries over the last couple of years. It's a trend in fantasy.
Biden's America.
Would you rather just give Marcus Mariota a run out there in this Commanders offense, or would you rather play Drake May against the Jets? I think I would play May. I don't trust Marcus Mariota. I know the Commanders' offense has been good, but I don't know.
What about Justin Herbert against the Saints?
Isn't this sad that we shouldn't have to think about this with the name Justin Herbert, but they don't throw the ball ever.
I know.
So I guess I would go Justin Herbert. Man, I don't like any of these options.
I know they're not looking.
Daniel Jones is the other name that's quite often available. So we'll have to think about this one more. It's pretty gross, Hartitz.
We will try to get back to you guys on that one. Hopefully.
Matthew Stafford, only 40% rostered. I don't know who he plays next week, but we're probably getting Cooper Kupp back. So Matthew Stafford with Cooper Kupp.
The Vikings, which we've seen teams put up numbers.
That's doable. I think that's doable with Kupp. That would be my recommendation.
That's probably the answer. And if there is an offense, I expect to be able to deal with Brian Flores's, blitz happy hijinks and all that going on. I do think it's Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford with the returning Cooper Kupp. Matthew Stafford, there's our Jaden Daniels replacement. We got there, Dwain. Great 12 minutes, to be great. Let's move on to, let's see any other points here. Jaden Daniels' mom said he's fine, so hopefully mom always knows best. So,
well, hey, parents are winning. this offseason. Who was it before? Who was the last one?
Oh.
I can't remember. It was the parent saying that the player was healthy, and one of our docs was saying that the player was injured. I can't remember who it was. Anyway, whatever.
Also, hold on. Last thing with the QB conversation for everyone still with us. We got a comment, JH in the chat. Bo Nix at home against the Panthers, Dwain. He's Cam Newton.
Maybe. Actually, I think I like Bo Nix the second most to Stafford. I mean, Bo Nix is running the ball, man.
And that Panthers team looks ready to roll over.
Yeah, it
Speaking of.
And it could be Bryce Young as the starter again by next week. The Andy Dalton thing is the wheels have come off.
Bo Nix, like Cam Newton, if he was a lot smaller and couldn't throw the football. So, that's what we got going for us there. With said Carolina Panthers, yeah, I mean, this was Bryce Young level weeks 1 through 2 bad. Hadn't quite seen that out of them with Dalton under center, but yeah, just 93 passing yards, 2 interceptions. The run game ended up getting a late touchdown by Chuba Hubbard to help the fantasy box scores, but yeah, absolutely brutal. Leading receiver, Jatavian Sanders with 61 yards. Deontay Johnson couldn't even crack 20 on the day. So I'd like to just kind of throw it out, Dwayne, but you know what? Next week in Denver against the Broncos defense, that will likely have Patrick Surtain, the second back. And as we saw on Thursday night, still look pretty good without him. Can you start anyone other than Chuba Hubbard in this offense with confidence at this point?
Yeah, I mean, if someone asked me, like, would I trade Deontay Johnson on high in our office hours over, in Discord last weekend? If you guys like that, Ian does those, I do those, Pete Overzet does them. So you guys come check out our Discord over at Fantasy Life. But I told someone, yeah, I mean, I would sell. I'm not like in a hurry to sell Deontay Johnson, but the potential for Bryce Young to come back and then some of these matchups that are on the horizon, like I wasn't against it. Now, Deontay Johnson was playing, he had a rib, knee, and ankle injury coming into the game. So, I mean, that probably had a little bit to do with this, but only a 19% target share. You mentioned Jatavian Sanders was the king in the passing game today, which wasn't saying a lot, but he did have a 35% target share. But Tommy Tremble was still out with that concussion. Is there anything else to say here? Xavier Leggett, the proud owner of Dollar Bill, the horse, 91% route participation. So he was at least out there, scored you 1.9 fantasy points. You did way better in a fantasy league that gave you points for just running routes than ones where you actually had to get a target and do something with them today. But Leggett was the number 2. That's really all I have to say. Ian, like Chuba Hubbard still had the workload, just, ran into a tougher matchup than what we thought. Like, Commanders are another defense that appear to be getting better.
That was about to be my next point. I mean, the Cardinals only scored 14 on them. Browns scored 13. Okay, they're the Browns. Ravens, I mean, it's not like they got blown out of the water in that game. You know what I'm saying? So Dan Quinn, as we've seen, a bit of a boomer busty defensive coordinator over the years, certainly flirting with some solid booms here in recent weeks. So we'll see
Dante
what
Fowler
happens.
Looking like a Pro Bowler out there today.
Yeah, he went ahead and took all that Cowboys pass rush depth with him. We're finding that out in a hurry. So, man, not great for the Carolina Panthers. But again, don't think you guys needed us to tell you that. The Rams took down the Raiders 20-15. Raiders did cover as 7-point dogs. The under cash at 43.5. So, a game where we found out we weren't going to have Cooper Kupp going into it. Found out we were going to have Jordan Whittington. However, he ended up playing just 9 snaps because, Dwayne, yes, there are a lot of beat reporters where this is their job. And yes, there are a lot of national insiders, and it's also their job. And they spend all week getting these sources and finding these things out. Yeah, I'm actually not sure why neither of them bothered to tell us about this. So, yeah, I guess that's just life these days in fantasy football and gambling in 2024. We don't know when someone plays if they're going to actually be injured or not. So I do hope Cooper Kupp is back on Thursday. Sean McVay said he's going to be. Hopefully it isn't his true full-time role, because if it's not, Dwayne, I don't think we're going to have anyone tell us otherwise. So, yeah, man, Kyron Williams, 2 touchdowns on the ground. Otherwise, hey, we're going to be starting Cooper Kupp when he's back. Excited to see it. Anything else you want to talk about on the Rams?
No, just to make you feel a little better. Jordan Whittington had 9 snaps. He had 0 routes. Sorry, it made you feel worse. Actually, yeah, he did not run a route. His shoulder was hurt, so he was better off being a blocker than trying to catch a ball. Yeah, nothing else. Kyron Williams is king, and we need Cooper Kupp back.
Actually, I did have one other thing. Trent Green did say on the broadcast that McVay told him the Rams wanted to give Kyron 2 series and then Corum 1 series and work them out that way. No. Wrong.
He was also lied to, or also doesn't. Yeah, no. 81% of the team's rushing attempts went to Kyron, 11% to Blake Corum, and 90% of the snaps to Kyron. So no. But how many times are we falling for this? Sean McVay says that stupid line like every 3 weeks to someone.
But he seems like such a nice guy.
We really don't want to give Kyron all this work. And then they just give Kyron all the work. I mean, I don't know when we're like, come on, we got to stop falling for that one.
God, I mean, I guess the end
Corum is the handcuff, though. That's the big takeaway. He still is. He was a handcuff before the bye. He still is after the bye.
Look, I get it. The end zone stopping Kyron on a lot of these. The dude's got 9 straight regular season games now, scoring a touchdown. Like, I don't want to say he's playing bad. He's the focal point of the offense. But, if you told me it was through 7 weeks of the season and Kyron Williams is joining Zamir White as the only running backs averaging under 4 yards per touch, I would think maybe you give your third-round running back a couple extra chances with the football. But, hey, Kyron Williams doing his thing. So that was the Rams. Over with the Raiders, we have Brock Bowers, 10 catches, 93 yards on a team high, 14 targets. Love to see that, and we are certainly expecting that each and every week now with Devontae Adams out of town. So love seeing that, Dwayne. But, Brock Bowers, if you want to call him the tight end 1 next week and the rest of the season, wouldn't disagree with you now, wouldn't have disagreed with you 12 hours ago. The real question, though, is it Alexander Mattis season, Dwayne? Because, my God, it looks like he dominated that backfield.
Yeah, he did today. 69%. I just thought, nice. My daughter loves Hamilton. And, there's a show. I mean, there's not a show. There's a song in there, Alexander Hamilton. But I just it's stuck in my head now. Alexander Madison. So, yeah, he had 69% of the offensive snaps today, 79% of the rushing attempts, and 48% of route participation. Why did I say 69% of the offensive snaps? I feel like I'm getting to that point in the show where we're like the news reporter, shuffling the papers, and I'll just say anything you put in front of me. And that's just because that's what the header says on this column over. Thank you, True Media, for giving us all this awesome data.
Love True Media.
Show. Love you guys. But yeah, so did take it over. We know Zamir White was still a little bit banged up coming into this game. So, I mean, can we for sure say that it's his? Probably not. But Alexander Madison has done more with his opportunities this season than what we have seen from Zamir White. So, yeah, I would say heading into next week, whenever I work on the projection share process, I will be updating this backfield to Madison as the lead. I won't have it as this big of a, difference between the two guys, but I'll definitely have Alexander Madison in the lead, Mr. Hartitz.
And honestly, this is a good example. I'm not trying to, freak out. Oh, yeah, we told you guys to fade Zamir White. But there was good coach speak from Antonio Pierce saying how much they planned on feeding Zamir White. But guess what, Dwayne? When you get fed the football and you do absolutely nothing with it, there is a certain point where talent at the running back position does matter. And I really didn't think Alexander Madison would be the one outperforming and out-talenting Zamir White, but that is somehow the world we live in. So good for him. Did get a team high, not team high, I say second most targets for Trey Tucker. No Jacoby Myers, though, in this one, and would expect it to revert back. So we'll see if we have Aiden O'Connell back under center. He apparently hurt his thumb. Rap sheet says believed to be broken. Dwayne, you do great work with our projections every week. Do you change the Raiders passing yards per game if it's Minshew versus O'Connell under center?
No, in fact, I'm just going to change the name of it to Raiders quarterback. That way I don't have to worry about it.
That's what we do in my 32-team league. It's just the team quarterback. Kind of refreshing. I'm not going to lie.
I can't do that because the way the projection model works, but no, there's not much difference.
Let's move on to the last game we're going to break down. Appreciate you guys sticking with us, as always, on the Fantasy Life show. The Chiefs beat the 49ers 28-18. Kansas City was actually 2.5-point dogs coming into this one. The under did cash at 48. So with the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, Dwayne, now has 8 interceptions versus 6 passing touchdowns on the season. Wow, what a time to be alive there. And yeah, you take away Rashee Rice, you take away Hollywood Brown, you take away even Juju Smith-Schuster, who re-aggravated his hamstring injury, and those are the types of things that can't happen. However, Mahomes did remind us he is quite the threat on the ground, particularly when he tricks the defense into thinking he's going out of bounds. That dude has been pulling that card for years now, insanely good at it, and used it today to get a 33-yard rush, his longest of his career, and then proceeded to score a short touchdown, which is a bit more rare to see out of him. Absolutely truck stick the 49ers, safety, which it happened to me one time, sophomore in high school. Nothing, Dwayne, is more humiliating than getting truck stick by the opposing team's quarterback. So really not sure how he's going to recover from
maybe
that
the kicker. If a kicker ever truck sticked you, that would be a new low.
I just couldn't even, I refuse to even imagine a reality where that could happen to anyone. But yes, I do think technically you are correct. So yeah, another down performance from Mahomes. But you know what, Dwayne, it's not like we've been ranking the guy inside the top 10 for quite some time now. So I'd love to think there could be a bounce back. But next week, in Vegas against the Raiders, still going to be a challenge to rank this guy higher than, mid-tier QB2 in the ranks, which is just a sad time to be alive. However, the one guy who we can trust in his Kansas City offense in the year 2024 is Kareem Hunt, Dwain, who, if he hadn't have done the things he did, we'd be looking at year 6 or something of Kareem Hunt putting up bonkers numbers in this offense. And he'd probably be, a future Hall of Famer at this point. But that's not the case. But here he is anyway, 78 yards on the ground and 2 scores. Also had 5 receiving yards. He almost had a 3rd touchdown, man. He got stopped at the 1-yard line. So, yes, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was eligible to return. No, he was not actually active. So, at what point do we have to make Kareem Hunt like a top 12 running back, Dwain? Because this was certainly a top 12 performance.
I'm not making him a top 12 running back, but I mean, he's definitely in the running back 2 conversation. So, I mean, I had him as a borderline running back 2 last week. So
he's getting 25 plus touches a game.
I get it. There's just too many damn good running backs this year for Kareem Hunt to make the top 12. Like, just go look at the list. That's the challenge. We have a lot of good running backs this season. So that it's more of that. The touches are definitely there. 3.5 yards per carry. I mean, he still doesn't look good, but like you mentioned, I mean, he's getting the touches, scored 2 touchdowns, nearly had a 3rd. So he had 4 carries inside the 5-yard line today.
Why do we start Chuba over Kareem Hunt?
Well, Chuba Hubbard has been doing it, and he's had a bigger role than even Kareem Hunt. And Chuba Hubbard's actually looked good playing. So up until now, you would say, okay, great. Chuba Hubbard had a bad game, but Chuba Hubbard, his snap shares have been around 70%. His rush attempts been around 70% versus 60 and 60. So he's had a bigger role and he's looked better than Kareem Hunt. Now we've got another data point this week. Do they get closer together? Yeah, I think they get closer together. I'm sorry. I'm just not excited about starting Kareem Hunt. Maybe I'll be wrong again.
He's kind of like Dobbins. He hasn't looked as good, but that's pretty much what we're dealing with.
No, Dobbins has looked much better than Hunt. Like I've watched every play from Dobbins, and I've watched Hunt because it's the late game, and so he's mostly the thing on red zone. I think Dobbins looks far better. But to your point, look, what I'm saying is not bad. He's a mid-range running back 2. I can't make him a running back 1 because it's the year of every other running back breaking out and being good.
And I'm not even saying you need to rank Kareem Hunt over those guys. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if he outperforms them over the next month. I mean,
I won't be either.
We're dealing with 20 plus touches a game. It's crazy.
I know. I wish the Chiefs offense looked better, to be honest. The situation isn't really very good. Overall, it's the Chiefs offense is just not very good. But anyway,
who do you think's the best pass
catcher? Neither is Hubbard. Best pass catcher besides Travis Kelce? Or are you talking about running backs?
I think Noah Gray is the most efficient pass catcher on this team right now.
I took the over on Noah Gray on his receiving yards today. So I teased it up to 29.5.
Ooh.
So that was nice. Yeah, he got there it's one of those that hit. So I love those kind because when they hit by halftime, you're like, all right, man, I already got it. And if you haven't gotten it by the end of the game, you're still alive. It's not like you need 80 yards. You just need one. You need to get one catch. Dude, Noah Gray's played really well. He has played really well. He's not getting enough playing time to be a factor. I mean, today, though, he had 53% route participation. I think it's going to be one of those things that's up and down. It's going to be game script, game matchup dependent. But, yeah, 53%, not terrible. 16% target share today. Kelce, obviously, is the main guy. But Xavier Worthy had a 32% target share today, Ian. So he must have scored a lot of fantasy points, right? Right? No, 5.4. 5.4.
That was a good Anakin Padme meme.
I know.
Good job by you.
That's what I know. That's what I was going for. I know you love that one.
Would have been a lot cooler if Mahomes didn't airmail the 71-yard touchdown that Worthy was open for just after halftime. But alas, he is now our week high leader in unrealized air yards with 127. So had the 8 targets. I think Worthy continues probably at this point, boomer bust wide receiver 4. Just at least.
Hey, look, we'll take it. He got the targets. The problem I worry about is, well, one, you had Juju get hurt in the game. Yeah. And so he wasn't playing. So Juju only ended up with a 19% route participation because the hamstring thing ended up really being a factor. The other thing is they probably did some things in the bye week to say, Worthy, we're going to do these things to actually get the ball to you so that you can help unlock our offense. And then he didn't. And that's my problem with Worthy. And I'm starting to see the old Mecole Hardman body language from Patrick Mahomes. It's almost like every time, he's like, oh, you should have cut the route off, or you should have done this, or he's just looking at him. So I don't know. It's not clicking right now for Worthy. We'll take it. 32% target share is still technically that's a positive event for Xavier Worthy, but would sure love to see him do more than 5.4 fantasy points when you're playing with freaking Patrick Mahomes.
Speaking of Mecole Hardman, did have 38 rushing yards and a touchdown in addition to a 17-yard catch. Coulda, shoulda, woulda added a 1-yard touchdown reception to that total. Slipped on the pretty much same exact play the Chiefs used to beat the 49ers back into overtime of the Super Bowl. So at this point, Dwain, again, looking ahead to next week against the Raiders. Mahomes, mid-tier QB2. Kareem Hunt, mid-tier RB2. Travis Kelce, look, he's had a couple nice games in a row, so I'm not going to freak out over this.
Yeah, he's fine.
He's fine. But Worthy, probably a boomer bust, wide receiver 4,
Yeah,
and otherwise we're good.
Yep, we're good. I mean, Juju, we'll see if he gets back, but Juju could eventually rejoin the wide receiver 4 conversation as well. Might be tough to trust him next week.
Now for the main event, the San Francisco 49ers. We had Deebo Samuel. You know, it would have been nice to know he had an illness before, 3:45 p.m. Eastern out there. But we were assured he was going to play anyway, and he did for 4 snaps. Then he went to the locker room before halftime and was ruled out. So I don't doubt that Deebo, I'm sure he was sick and couldn't play. I'm sure he'd be out there if he was able to. But again, when we're talking about organizations with their injury reporting, Niners haven't exactly earned the benefit of the doubt, to put it kindly here, Dwain, with everything they've been doing throughout this short season still. So again, didn't have Deebo, and sadly also did not have Brandon Ayuk for the second half of this one, and could in fact be quite a bit longer. It is indeed feared to be an ACL injury per head coach Kyle Shanahan. So Deebo, you would think he'll be back with the illness. Ayuk, man, fingers crossed it's not going to be that severe of an issue, but looking like it could be that way. So with no Deebo, with no Ayuk, Dwain, how did we see this wide receiver room breaking out?
Yeah, so it was a big time opportunity today for Ricky Pearsall, who was just activated off of IR due to the gunshot wound. He had an 87% route participation to lead the team, 16% target share. Didn't do much with it from a fantasy perspective. But there could be some room for Pearsall, because suddenly with all the injuries they have, we'll see what happens with Juwan Jennings. I think once Juwan Jennings is back as well as he's played, he's definitely going to get his playing time too. Chris Conley was out there. I don't think that's going to matter once Juwan Jennings is back. But if Brandon Ayuk is out, man, like George Kittle is already the tight end 1 right now in fantasy scoring for the year. I mean, he had a 23% target share today, a 91% route participation, 15 fantasy points. We know George Kittle in this offense at any time, when you're down 2 of these weapons, man, like he's the tight end 1. He's the tight end 1 in fantasy football whenever this thing is highly condensed. And sounds like we're still a little bit of time away from Christian McCaffrey. If Deebo's just sick, we'll probably have Deebo back next week, but then it's going to be all Deebo and George Kittle if in fact we have a long-term injury here for Brandon Ayuk. So Deebo also, Ian, like borderline wide receiver 1 if we have no Ayuk, if it's just him and Kittle. Once you get CMC back, you might be able to bump, Deebo down a little bit. But I think Deebo's squarely locked in the mid-range wide receiver 2 to high-end wide receiver 2 range the rest of the way if Ayuk's out for the season.
I guess so, man. I mean, who else are going to throw the ball to or hand it to at this point?
Well, Juwan Jennings probably.
Yeah, I mean, he was out in this one, so we'll see if he's able to get back out there sooner rather than later.
He has life. Yeah. Juwan Jennings has life now. But
he does. So we'll see how that breaks out. You mentioned the big Kittle game, 92 yards, caught 6 of 7 targets, always looking good, always doing his funky, first down celebration, which I appreciate. Jordan Mason, 58 scoreless yards on the ground, 2 catches for 11 yards. Didn't seem to be limited, Dwain, coming off that shoulder injury.
Yeah, 86% of the snaps, 58% of the rushing attempts. But again, there were 8 rushing attempts by Brock Purdy in this one, so I can't exclude scrambles yet. Design rushing attempts, probably my guess is like 70, 80% of them. We're going to Jordan Mason. Yeah. So Isaac Grendo, non-factor, had 4% of the carry. So hopefully you didn't blow a ton of fab on Mr. Grendo. If you did, you have a handcuff, until we get CMC back.
Could have, should have, would have had a touchdown for Mason. At 2 separate points, the 49ers were down at the 1-yard line, and at 2 separate points, Brock Purdy called his own number with a QB sneak. They did do a really cool one, Dwain, where they had the left and the right guard. They both pulled opposite ways wide, which just pulled the entire attention of the linebackers outside, and they basically got like a one-on-one sneak with their center and the D tackle that Purdy managed to convert on. So at least had that sliver of goodness for the 49ers, but they will get to take out all their frustrations next Sunday night against the Dallas Cowboys. So, Dwain, let's say Deebo, Ayuk, CMC are all out. Let's say Kittle gets sick and he misses that game. Would you still expect the Cowboys to have a chance? Because I wouldn't.
Yeah, Yeah, I would expect them to have a chance, but you would think with all those players out, we would say that the Cowboys are guaranteed to win,
No,
and they probably would still lose because I don't think they could stop Jordan Mason.
I know.
I don't think they can't stop a run game, man. They cannot stop a run game at all.
Wow. All right. And with that, just needed to get some little cowboy optimism from Dwain there before we rounded things out. But that is going to wrap up this edition of the Fantasy Life Show, everybody. Dwain, the Russell Wilson experiment looks like it is going swimmingly. You know, anytime you can complete fewer than 50% of your passes as the alleged savior from the pocket, gotta love that. Did throw a jump ball up to George Pickens, though, so we can all hang our
Pickens
hat
has
on
2
that.
for 56, so there's
Wow.
a chance Pickens has 100 yards today. I think I think that's the main thing people were hoping for is would Russ just unlock a few more deep targets to Pickens, and that's worked out so pretty well so far. Brees Hall has 4 catches for 93 yards. So
Dude, that was a sick run. No, but I was just like, I'm looking at it right now. We're already getting, oh, look at Russ always open to Pickens. He underthrew a deep ball. It's not like Pickens had 0 catches the entire freaking season with Fields. But yeah, shout out Brees Hall, and we'll see.
And Pickens just got a touchdown.
Did he really? Wow, that's
just got a touchdown as you were giving that commentary from Russell Wilson. It was a fade to the back corner of the end zone, perfectly thrown. Way to motivate Russell Wilson, Ian. You did a great job with that.
Wow.
Are you mic'd straight into his helmet?
And Pickens actually did now catch his first touchdown of the year, something that he didn't do with Fields. Well, I'm going to go drink some wine after that, Dwain. I don't know about you. I know you got some utilization. Goodness, you're getting ready for everyone tomorrow morning.
Yeah, well, the utilization report will be up on the site as far as all of the tools, guys, and we have the utilization score. And I have to say, it is killing it. The utilization score has been absolutely killing it and helping us call out who the next breakouts are going to be, the guys that are probably overrated. I know it sounds gross, but it's been saying that Jaden Reed, is due for regression. Not saying Jaden Reed sucks. It's just been saying Jaden Reed's been due for regression. It was saying that not George Pickens. It was saying that Drake London was going to be an absolute smash like 4 weeks ago. So I'm pretty proud of the little utilization score, Ian. Like, it's doing a good job. It's obviously it's one tool. It's one tool, but it's a pretty good one, and we put a lot of work into it. So you guys can check that out. All will be live tomorrow at 8 a.m. And then at some point tomorrow, either probably late afternoonish, I'll have the utilization report itself, the full write-up out. Been trying to get those out on Monday. And I know somebody else here, Ian, that likes to grind a little film, maybe get a sheesh report out.
We will be sheeshing as always on Tuesday on the Fantasy Life Show. And while that utilization data is live at 8 a.m., we'll be live again here at 9 a.m. Myself, Paul Charchian, and Chris Allen overreacting and underacting to Sunday's biggest news. So appreciate you guys joining us for this one, and make sure you do for that one as well. So for Dwain,